Chapter 994. In front of the main entrance of the Great Light Temple, Chu Xiu's group of experts stood there arrogantly, as though they were on a sightseeing tour. It was not easy to observe the Great Light Temple of the Northern Buddhist sect at such a close distance. However, at this moment, the Great Light Temple's cultivators guarding the gate were looking at Chu Xiu and the others warily. Their faces showed that they were not afraid of death. Clearly, if Chu Xiu and the others dared to do anything like barging into the mountain gate, they would really dare to charge forward and risk their lives. The gate was slowly pushed open. Su Ci and the others walked out and looked at Chu Xiu unkindly. Su Yan was the first to say coldly, "Chu Xiu, what are you doing here at the Great Light Temple?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Your Temple of Great Light is not some dragon's lair or tiger's den, so why can't I come?" Su Yan snorted. "Chu Xiu, don't be sarcastic here. Taoism is working together with Eastern Qi to suppress the Northern Yen. You are in trouble now. Are you here at the Great Light Temple just to enjoy the scenery?" Chu Xiu's expression turned serious and he said in a low voice, "Master Su Yan is right. I am here at the Great Light Temple because of this matter." The people from the Great Light Temple were stunned. Taoism is working together with Eastern Qi to suppress the Northern Yen. What are you doing here at the Great Light Temple? Su Yan sneered. Are you here to tell us that Taoism and Buddhism are at odds with each other so that we can help you? If you have such thoughts, I advise you to go back. Although we read scriptures every day, we have not read to the point where our minds are muddled. Chu Xiu shook his head. Of course I want the Great Light Temple to do this, but unfortunately, you won't. On the contrary, I am worried that the Great Light Temple will attack the Martial Suppression Hall. So today, I came first. After all, it is better to attack first than to attack later. Hearing this, the people from the Great Light Temple wanted to break their vows and curse. They had never heard of such a ridiculous reason. Just because you are worried that the Great Light Temple will attack you, you came first. What is this? Persecutory delusion? There are always people who want to harm me? The Temple of Great Light was not the one who started this incident. In fact, they were still discussing whether or not they should make a move just now. They had yet to make up their minds. Su Ci said, "Chu Xiu, what are you trying to do? Just because of such a ridiculous reason, you personally brought your people and came to my Temple of Great Light in such an aggressive manner?" Chu Xiu said solemnly, "Abbot Su Ci, this reason isn't funny at all. On the contrary, it's very important. To fend off foreign aggression, we must first stabilize the internal situation. I am currently resisting Eastern Qi and Haotian Taoism. If someone stabs me in the back, who am I going to ask for justice?" Chu Xiu's bold and confident words almost made Su Ci laugh in anger. "Then tell me, what is the meaning of your visit? Don't tell me you want to destroy the Great Light Temple prematurely?" Chu Xiu shook his head. Of course not. The Bodhi Yard of the Great Light Temple has countless experts from the older generation. I can't destroy the Great Light Temple with just these few people. No one in the pugilistic world can destroy the Great Light Temple either. I'm here to ask for a promise from the Great Light Temple." "What promise?" Chu Xiu squinted. "A promise that in this incident, the Great Light Temple will remain neutral and will not attack. We will also have to swear to Buddha. Monks don't lie, not to mention that I've made a vow to Buddha." Su Ci said coldly, "Impossible. The Great Light Temple will not give you any promises." "Chu Xiu, you're forcing the Great Light Temple again. Perhaps the Great Light Temple wouldn't have made a move before, but now, the Great Light Temple doesn't mind making a move." Putting aside the fact that the Great Light Temple had not made up their mind to attack, even if they had made up their mind not to get involved, they would not give Chu Xiu any promises. Since when did the Great Light Temple, one of the Buddhist sects in the north and south, have to make a promise to someone from the demonic path? Chu Xiu's words completely infuriated Su Ci. He took a step forward, and his body shone with Buddhist light. That powerful aura shot into the sky, and one could vaguely hear the sound of Buddhist chanting in midair. The evil moon saber was held in Chu Xiu's hand, and the inner demon was suppressing the power of the evil moon saber. In that instant, a violent demonic aura swept through the sky. The sky was clear, but the shadow of a moon was reflected in the sky. It was a blood moon. Seeing the confrontation between the two, Shang Tianliang cursed in his heart. Like hell, I'll believe you. Previously, this Chu Xiu had promised him that he would not attack this time, but now he had come to provoke him. Wasn't he still going to attack? However, this time, Chu Xiu did not attack directly. Instead, he suppressed the power of the evil moon saber and said with a smile, Master Su Ci, don't be so agitated. I've already experienced your martial arts in the primitive demon cave, and I don't want to experience it again. I'm not asking the Great Light Temple for this promise for free. I'm offering something in exchange. Seeing Chu Xiu restrain his saber, Su Ci also restrained some of his power. He asked, what are you offering? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, I'll use the lives of 27,396 Buddhist monks in the northern Yan kingdom to trade. What did you say? This time, not only Su Ci, but all the warriors from the Great Light Temple released a powerful aura, as if they wanted to swallow Chu Xiu alive. Chu Xiu said coldly, Masters, don't be so agitated. How do you usually address me, Chu Xiu? Is it the demonic Dao villain? Since I've become a demonic Dao villain, I have to live up to this name. What is the demonic Dao? Despicable, shameless, cruel, murderous, committed all kinds of bad things, and committed all kinds of crimes. Am I right? But this time, I didn't provoke the Dao sect. In the end, not only did the Dao sect want to suppress me, but they also want to destroy the foundation that I've built in the northern Yan for so many years. My principle, Chu Xiu, is that whoever makes life difficult for me, I'll make life difficult for them. Next, I will use all my strength to face the pressure from Eastern Qi and the Dao sect. There can be no mistakes in the future. So, the Great Light Temple has to give me this promise, even if you don't want to. If you really don't give it to me, with an order from me, the Blue Dragon Society's assassins in the northern Yan will immediately pluck the bald heads of 27,396 Buddhist monks in the northern Yan territory. The Great Light Temple will be responsible for all of this. Also, the northern Yan court will issue a decree to exterminate the Buddhists in the northern Yan territory. Anyone who believes in Buddhism will be exiled to the bitter cold of the far north. Anyone who secretly hides Buddhist scriptures will be punished with treason. Master Su Ci, do you believe that in this way, there will be no trace of your Buddhist lineage in the entire northern Yan within a month? When that time comes, all of you will be the sinners of the Buddhists. When Chu Xiu said this, everyone in the Great Light Temple turned pale. It was as if they wanted to skin Chu Xiu alive. Even Shang Tianliang looked at Chu Xiu in shock. This move was truly sinister. They had seen wicked people, but they had never seen someone so wicked. As the Great Light Temple was close to the northern Yan territory, the northern Yan Dao sect's influence was not strong. On the contrary, there were still some small temples. Although these people were not from the Great Light Temple, they were all disciples of the Buddhists. They came from the same source. That was the lives of more than 20,000 Buddhist disciples. How could the Great Light Temple ignore it? In addition, once the northern Yan court issued the decree to exterminate the Buddhists, the foundation that the Great Light Temple had spent thousands of years building in the northern Yan territory would be destroyed in a month's time. After a long while, Su Ci squeezed out a few words from between his teeth, Chu Xiu. Don't you dare. Chu Xiu held his saber and said expressionlessly, You'll see if I dare. Master Su Ci, if you have the guts, then make a bet. Or you can leave me in the Great Light Temple right now. The choice is in your hands. Su Ci, who had always appeared to be extremely calm, was so angry that his heart trembled. After a while, he gritted his teeth and said, I swear to Buddha that during the time when Eastern Qi and Taoism are attacking northern Yan, the Temple of Great Light will seal off the mountain. Not a single monk will come out. Are you satisfied now? Chu Xiu put away his saber and smiled again. Satisfied, of course I'm satisfied. Master Su Ci, you're decisive. I'm impressed. If that's the case, I won't disturb you any longer." After that, Chu Xiu waved his hand and led his people down the mountain. After Chu Xiu and the others left, Su Yan was so angry that he was shaking. He could not even speak. Su Jing said coldly, "Shameless." Su Yun snorted and said, "They deserve to die." Yuan Guang sighed and said, 800 years ago, this poor monk had never seen such a shameless and despicable demonic cultivator. The morals of the world are degenerating, and people are not what they used to be. 800 years ago, even the demonic cultivators had to follow the rules. Why has it become like this now? Beside him, Shudu pursed his lips and said, "Most people from the demonic path follow the rules. Chu Xiu is the only one who doesn't. Otherwise, why do you think he has such strength and influence at such a young age? Those who aren't as strong as him have been beaten to death. Those who aren't as shameless as him have been tricked to death by him." Su Ci said nothing with a dark expression. He only waved his hand and said, "Seal the mountain." This time, the Great Light Temple would definitely suffer a loss. There was no point in saying anything more. Chu Xiu could be shameless, but the Great Light Temple could not. They could not ignore the lives of the other monks, and the foundation of the Buddhist lineage in the northern Yen could not be lost either. Therefore, they could only lower their heads. Meanwhile, at the foot of the mountain, Shang Tianliang shook his head slightly and said, "Chu Xiu, kid, this move of yours is not just any ordinary sneaky move. Those monks from the Great Light Temple will definitely fight you to the death in the future. Moreover, you can only use this move once. I'm afraid it won't work a second time." The people of the Great Light Temple were not idiots. After this incident, they would definitely make arrangements for the Buddhist disciples in the northern Yen territory. They would not be threatened by Chu Xiu like this again. Moreover, after this incident, the Great Light Temple would definitely hate Chu Xiu to the core. If there was another opportunity like this, they would definitely not hesitate and would directly make a move. Chapter 995. Chu Xiu did not underestimate the Great Light Temple and knew the consequences of offending the Great Light Temple. However, for the current Chu Xiu, even if he did not completely offend the Great Light Temple now, it would be the same in the future. Hearing Shang Tianliang say that the Great Light Temple would definitely not rest until he was dead, Chu Xiu said lightly, "It doesn't matter. The righteous and the demonic are opposed. In the future, if I decide to return to the Kunlun devil cult, the Great Light Temple will still want to tear me into pieces. Anyway, it will happen sooner or later. I just brought this matter forward." Shang Tianliang and the others thought about it carefully. What Chu Xiu said was quite reasonable. Anyway, there were many people in the pugilistic world who wanted to tear him into pieces. The Great Light Temple did not make much of a difference. After dealing with the Great Light Temple, Chu Xiu prepared to go to West Chu with Xiang Chong to meet the moon-worshipping cult and the West Chu royal family. This kind of matter did not require a lot of people, so the people from the Jianghu Hall, including Shang Tianliang, were arranged by Chu Xiu to stay in the northern Yen to deal with accidents. He and Xiang Chong went all the way to West Chu. Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong did not like each other, so the two of them did not communicate much along the way. Moreover, now that the situation had reached such a critical point, they did not have the mood to chat on the road. They rushed to West Chu as fast as they could. However, after arriving at West Chu, Xiang Chong wanted to find the West Chu royal family first, while Chu Xiu was prepared to find the moon-worshipping cult first. The two of them had a dispute on this point. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Your Highness, the last time the northern Yen joined forces with West Chu to fight against eastern Qi, how much effort did West Chu put in?" Xiang Chong frowned and said, "Last time, the West Chu imperial court didn't play tricks. But with their strength, even if they didn't play tricks, their strength is still limited. So last time against eastern Qi, it was our northern Yen who was the main attacker. As for the West Chu imperial court, they mainly restrained the power of eastern Qi." "Why do you ask?" Chu Xiu softly said, "The West Chu court strength can be seen here. They can't be weak, but they can't be considered strong either. But the moon-worshipping cult's strength is certainly strong enough. Moreover, your highness should know the status of the moon-worshipping cult in the West Chu land. As long as he dealt with the moon-worshipping cult first, the West Chu imperial court would be much simpler. Moreover, your highness, please don't forget that our opponents this time are not only Eastern Qi, but also the forces of the righteous martial arts world. Xiang Chong couldn't beat Chu Xiu in this matter. Since Chu Xiu said so, he had to agree to go to the moon-worshipping cult first. Chu Xiu had been to the moon-worshipping cult once before. It was during the war between the righteous and demonic forces. But that time, everyone just fought outside and didn't go inside to watch. This time, when Chu Xiu came, after reporting his name, Dong Wang Tai, the moon-worshipping cult's high priest, and the moon-worshipping cult's saintess personally came to greet him. With Chu Xiu's current strength and status, he was qualified to receive this kind of treatment. Dong Wang Tai still had some injuries that hadn't healed. When fighting for the demon seed, he burned his blood essence to help Yi Xiaonan get the demon seed. This kind of consumption couldn't be recovered in a short time. As for the moon-worshipping cult's high priest, Chu Xiu didn't have many dealings with him, but he heard that he was low-key and mysterious. Among them, the one that Chu Xiu had the most dealings with was the moon-worshipping cult's saintess. But after seeing her, Chu Xiu stared at her. Of course, Chu Xiu had never seen a beautiful woman before. He was just curious about the current state of the moon-worshipping cult's saintess. She was actually still in the unity of heaven and man state. Most of the martial artists who entered the Longhu list with Chu Xiu had now stepped into the real pellet state. If it was someone else, it would be normal even if their strength was weak, but it was the moon-worshipping cult's saintess. The moon-worshipping cult's saintess chuckled and said, "Why is official Chu staring at me? Are you interested in me? If it's others, I will definitely refuse. If it's you, official Chu, I can consider it." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Even if I want to, Master Yi won't be willing. The moon-worshipping cult saintess won't be abducted by an outsider." After making a joke, Chu Xiu walked into the moon-worshipping cult under the lead of Dong Wang Tai and the moon-worshipping cult's high priest. Following behind Chu Xiu, Xiang Chong was a little upset. When he was in the northern Yan, he didn't feel that he was worse than Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had the Jianghu Hall, and he also had the Royal Consecrator Hall. Chu Xiu had the hidden demon lineage, and he was also the northern Yan lord. Chu Xiu was powerful. Although he couldn't defeat him, with the 9-dragon seal, he still had the power to fight. But as soon as the result came out, the difference was obvious. Chu Xiu's current reputation was built by him. As a demon, even the moon-worshipping cult, the current leader of the demon, would not neglect Chu Xiu. In addition to Yi Xiaonan, the 3 high-level officials came out to greet him, and their attitude was also very polite. As for Xiang Chong, although he wasn't ignored, it was obvious that those in the moon-worshipping cult didn't take him seriously. As a Northern Yan lord, what achievements did he have outside of the Northern Yan? The people of Jianghu recognized the fist, not the identity of the Northern Yan royal family. Xiang Chong followed Dong Wang Tai and the others into the moon-worshipping cult. The scenery along the way was extremely beautiful. The scenery was pleasant, and even some of the buildings were designed in a very novel way. It was as if they were one with the scenery, and Xiang Chong was slightly surprised. Previously, he always thought that the interior of a big demon sect like the moon-worshipping cult must be extremely gloomy. Who would have thought that it was like a paradise on earth? Moreover, the disciples of the moon-worshipping cult didn't have the gloomy feeling of ordinary demon martial artists. Instead, the men were handsome, and the women were fair and beautiful. This made Xiang Chong secretly wonder. Could it be that the moon-worshipping cult chose disciples based on appearance first? At the sacred lake in the center of the moon-worshipping cult, Yi Xiaonan sat in a pavilion by the lake, waiting for Chu Xiu and the others. Previously, when Yi Xiaonan obtained the demon seed, Chu Xiu thought that he should be in a state of closed-door training. But now, it seemed that Yi Xiaonan wasn't in seclusion. Was he not in a hurry to refine the demon seed? As he thought about it, Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong walked over and cupped their hands. "Greetings, hierarchy." Yi Xiaonan looked at Chu Xiu, and Chu Xiu also looked at Yi Xiaonan. At this moment, both of them paused at the same time. This was the first time that Chu Xiu officially met the number one demon in the world, and Yi Xiaonan had naturally heard of Chu Xiu's name. In fact, according to the standpoint of the two sides, the two should be hostile. However, with the pressure of the righteous sects, even if the demon lineage wasn't in the same camp, they wouldn't kill each other at this time. The two sides didn't have any hostility when they met. But at this moment, Yi Xiaonan suddenly said, "That stone that looks like a knife, what is it?" Dong Wangtai felt embarrassed when he heard Yi Xiaonan suddenly ask such a question. Hierarchy was too straightforward. How could this kind of thing be asked face to face? Even if it was out of curiosity, it was good to beat around the bush. Moreover, why would Chu Xiu say it? Chu Xiu was also stunned when he heard Yi Xiaonan say this, but then he reacted. Yi Xiaonan didn't ask this because he coveted his stone knife, nor did it contain any other meaning. It was purely out of curiosity. Chu Xiu didn't believe in Yi Xiaonan's character, but he believed in Yi Xiaonan's pride. If Yi Xiaonan was really interested in the stone knife and wanted to snatch it, his first reaction would definitely be to directly snatch it instead of probing. With his strength, there was no point in being secretive like this. Therefore, Chu Xiu paused and said directly, "That is a knife embryo condensed from the dragon vein of the demon dragon. Only the rootless sacred flame can refine it into a knife." In the past, before Dugu Weiwei's listen to spring rain was refined, it was also this kind of knife embryo. Dong Wangtai and the others suddenly gasped. They didn't expect that the seemingly unremarkable stone knife had such a great origin. It was actually an existence of the same origin as the demonic knife listened to spring rain. Of course, what surprised them even more was that Chu Xiu actually said it after Yi Xiaonan asked this question. They really couldn't understand these two people. Yi Xiaonan wasn't surprised. He just nodded and said, "So that's how it is." His curiosity had been satisfied. Moreover, not to mention that what Chu Xiu obtained was only a knife embryo, even if it was the complete listen to spring rain, Yi Xiaonan wouldn't be interested. The crescent blade in his hand was a magic weapon that he had personally forged. The tool spirit was unusually compatible with him. No matter how good listen to spring rain was, it wasn't his knife. "Why did you come to moon-worshipping cult this time?" Yi Xiaonan asked. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "I think you all already know what happened in Eastern Qi. The Dao lineage joined forces with the Eastern Qi imperial court to attack Northern Yan, but in fact, their target is me. I didn't expect the Orthodox lineage, especially the Dao lineage, to have this kind of courage. Therefore, this time, I also want to ask moon-worshipping cult to help." Yi Xiaonan didn't speak. He pondered for less than 3 breaths of time and only spat out a word, "Yes." Xiang Chong, who was standing to the side, stared with his eyes wide open. What was going on? Previously, he was still thinking about how Chu Xiu should use his glib tongue to persuade Yi Xiaonan to help. In the end, Chu Xiu only made clear his purpose of coming, and the other party actually agreed. Wasn't this too simple? If he had known it was so simple, he probably wouldn't have needed Chu Xiu to come this time. He could have done it himself. East Emperor Tai and the High Priest also didn't expect Yi Xiaonan to agree so quickly. They were just about to say something when Yi Xiaonan knocked on the table and spat out 4 words, "Without the lips, the teeth will be cold." Yi Xiaonan agreed so quickly not because he didn't use his brain, nor because Chu Xiu had a big face, but because of these 4 words. In the past, when moon-worshipping cult was besieged by the orthodox martial arts world as a target, whether it was the time when the two sides joined forces at Fuyu, or when Yi Xiaonan went out of seclusion to attack the orthodox, although the Yinma lineage asked for some benefits, they also took action. This time, Yi Xiaonan agreed so quickly because of these 4 words. The bright devil and the hidden devil were both devils. This time, they turned a blind eye. Next time, they would be the unlucky ones. Chapter 996. As for Yi Xiaonan, it was very difficult for Chu Xiu to describe him. Although he came from the number 1 demonic path sect and had single-handedly raised the moon-worshipping cult to its current peak, in reality, Yi Xiaonan didn't have much of the demonic path style. In Chu Xiu's opinion, Yi Xiaonan wasn't ruthless enough or despicable enough. Of course, he wouldn't be indecisive or soft-hearted. In terms of doing things, he had always used the identity of the moon-worshipping cult's leader to carry out various plans with absolute rationality. However, when it came to being a person, he wasn't a sect master, nor was he a demon. If Chu Xiu were to insist, Yi Xiaonan should only be a martial artist, a pure martial artist. Perhaps it could be said that when one reached his realm, they were fully deserving of the title of powerhouse. Yi Xiaonan wasn't a martial maniac, but he was tireless in his pursuit of power. It was because of this that he was able to successfully cultivate the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra and become the #1 demonic path cultivator. It was very difficult to become an opponent with such a person because the other party had no weaknesses. Unless you could completely defeat the other party in terms of strength, you wouldn't be able to defeat the other party. But it was much easier to become an ally with such a person. As long as you didn't play tricks and put the interests of all sides on the table, Yi Xiaonan would naturally make the most suitable choice for the moon-worshipping cult. Before coming to West Chu, Chu Xiu had already expected this. As long as he clearly said everything, with Yi Xiaonan's personality, he would naturally know what to choose. But at this time, Yi Xiaonan said, the moon-worshipping cult will make a move, but the moon-worshipping cult will not leave West Chu. Xiang Chang's expression couldn't help changing. What was the point of not leaving West Chu? What was the difference between agreeing and not agreeing? But then Yi Xiaonan said, similarly, none of the righteous sects in the land of West Chu will leave West Chu. Chu Xiu nodded and said, it is enough for the moon-worshipping cult to do this. This one is very grateful. Xiang Chong rubbed his head. Only now did he understand what Yi Xiaonan meant. There were quite a few righteous sects in West Chu. Just the Celestial Master Mansion was the biggest threat. There was also the Forgetting Sword Hut and the Storm Sword Tomb. Although the Chunyang Dao sect and the real martial arts order were the ones who started the fight, they were fighting in the name of killing the demons. It was hard to guarantee that the other righteous sects would not take action. This was also the reason why Chu Xiu had forced the Great Light Temple to make a promise. As long as the moon-worshipping cult could stop the righteous forces of West Chu, it would be a great help to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu said at this time, that's right, this time I came to West Chu not only to ask the moon-worshipping religion to help, but also to contact the West Chu royal family. I also want to inquire about the relationship between the West Chu royal family and the moon-worshipping cult. Which side will they stand on? Now that the two sides had decided to join forces, Dong Wang Tai and the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult treated Chu Xiu and his companion better. Hearing this, East Emperor Tai said, West Chu royal family. That's hard to say. You know the situation in West Chu. The martial arts world is chaotic and the power of the imperial court is very weak. It is so weak that the words of the imperial court are not as effective as the big sects in the martial arts world. They even often ask us for help to deal with the martial arts world's affairs. So the relationship between the West Chu royal family and the martial arts world is not that tense. It should be said that they have a good relationship with everyone. The West Chu royal family's imperial astronomer is a priest from the Celestial Master Mansion. Every year, the emperor will go to the Celestial Master Mansion to pray for blessings. If they were not afraid of offending the moon-worshipping cult, the West Chu royal family would be willing to let the Celestial Master Mansion become the national religion. But at the same time, the people of the moon-worshipping cult have some privileges in West Chu. Many of the imperial doctors in the palace are disciples of the moon-worshipping cult. Chu Xiu had a strange expression and said, the disciples of the moon-worshipping cult are imperial doctors? The high priest of the moon-worshipping cult laughed and said, Official Chu, don't be blinded by a leaf. You need to know that voodoo can kill and also save people. The path of life and death is in your heart. Whether you kill or save, it all depends on how you want to use it. Dong Wang Tai waved his hand in disdain and said, all right, don't talk about your useless theories. After rebuking the high priest, Dong Wang Tai turned to Chu Xiu and said, Official Chu, if you want to go to the West Chu royal family, I can go with you. The West Chu royal family will give face to the moon-worshipping cult. Of course, it is up to you how to negotiate. Chu Xiu nodded and said, then I will have to trouble Lord Dong Huangtai. After the discussion, Chu Xiu and the others did not delay and followed Dong Huangtai to West Chu's capital city, Jianghu City. As the weakest of the three countries, Jianghu City was not as good as the eastern Qi's Great Liang City and the northern Yan's Yanjing City. Although Jianghu City was a capital city, it was not bad. But compared to the other two, it was much smaller. Dong Huangtai said that he had some face in the West Chu royal family. This was not an exaggeration. As soon as he entered the city, someone reported the news. Before Chu Xiu and the others could enter the city, a short and fat old man in brocade smiled and said, Lord Dong Huangtai, you haven't come to Jianghu City for a long time. How come you have time to come today? Since you are here, don't be in a hurry to leave. Recently, my men caught a 7-colored golden pheasant in the 100,000 mountains. It is a rare treasure. Later, I will have someone add some mushrooms to stew it and we will have a good meal. The short and fat old man looked funny, but Chu Xiu could feel that he was also in the spiritual refinement realm. Of course, if he was not in the spiritual refinement realm, he would not dare to be friends with Dong Huangtai and call him brother. At this time, when the short and fat old man saw Chu Xiu, his eyes narrowed. Obviously, he recognized Chu Xiu, but he said, these two are. Dong Huangtai said lightly, the number one of the young generation in the demon path, the leader of the martial suppression hall, the official Chu Xiu, who controls the northern Yen Jianghu. Haven't you heard of him? As for the other one, he is the leader of the northern Yen Imperial Consecration Hall, the northern King Xiang Chong of the northern Yen. Dong Huangtai pointed at the short and fat old man and said, this is the general of the Langia army, jade-faced flying dragon, Yuan Fu. Hearing this name, Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong's expressions became extremely strange. They knew that the Langia army was the strongest army in the West Chu army. It was equivalent to the 5 armies of the northern Yen kingdom. Of course, there were 5 of the 5 armies of the kingdom, but West Chu only had 1 Langia army. But who would have thought that this funny-looking short and fat old man was the general of the Langia army? Wasn't his image a little too different? Most importantly, his nickname was Jade-Faced Flying Dragon, which was very funny. Flying Dragon was fine, but what if he was very fast? After all, size did not mean speed. But what the hell was Jade-Faced? How could this look be called Jade-Faced? Yuan Fu did not care about the looks of Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong. He just rubbed his hands awkwardly and said, do you want to see His Majesty? Dong Huangtai rolled his eyes and said, if we don't want to see His Majesty, why did we come all the way to Jianghu? Yuan Fu laughed and said, His Majesty has been a little tired recently, so it's not convenient for him to come. How about this, you can stay at my place for a night, and I'll hold a welcoming dinner for you. After reporting tomorrow, you can go see His Majesty. At this moment, Dong Huangtai's eyes suddenly turned gloomy. Yuan Fu, you and I are old friends. You can fool others, but now you want to fool me? Don't play tricks with me. What is His Majesty doing? Yuan Fu slapped his thigh and smiled bitterly. Don't vent your anger on me. I have no choice. People from the Celestial Master Mansion, the Forgetting Sword Hut, and the Storm Sword Tomb are all here. If you go in again, won't you fight? I can only send you away first. Hearing Yuan Fu say this, Chu Xiu and Xiang Chong looked at each other and their hearts sank. There were many smart people in the martial world. What they could think of, others could also think of. The Celestial Master Mansion and other forces were in West Chu. Even if they thought of it late, they were the ones who got there first. Dong Huangtai sneered, oh? You're all here. It's quite lively. How about bringing us along? Brother Yuan, don't worry. We'll give you face, but we'll do it inside the Imperial City. Hearing Dong Huangtai say this, Yuan Fu could only bring them into the Imperial City. They didn't want to offend people from the righteous path, so they naturally didn't want to offend people from the demonic path either. At this time, in the imperial palace, a middle-aged man wearing a dragon robe sat at the top. Below him sat 3 people. One of them was the Celestial Master Mansion's senior Qing. Beside him stood Xian Longzi. Actually, the Celestial Master Mansion didn't want to get involved this time. It was just that Eastern Qi was making more and more noise. The Celestial Master Mansion was one of the 3 great Daoist sections. The other 2 sects had already raised the banner of killing demons. If the Celestial Master Mansion didn't do anything, it wouldn't be good. The other 2 were Yan Ji of the Storm Sword Tomb and Shen Baochen of the Forgetting Sword Hut. Their goal was simple. They wanted to test the West Chu royal family's attitude. If the West Chu royal court was with the righteous path, they would be like a tiger with wings. But on the other hand, if the West Chu royal court was with the demonic path, they would have to kill this idea as soon as possible. The West Chu emperor, Meng Yunsheng, was a middle-aged man with a scholarly appearance. He didn't have the domineering aura of an emperor. Instead, he had a scholarly aura. Among the current emperors of the 3 countries, Meng Yunsheng wasn't the most mediocre one. He had the same ambition as Xiang Long. But it was a pity that the Northern Yan still had some foundation. With their West Chu country's power, no matter how ambitious Meng Yunsheng was, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't change the situation. Now that they could ensure the West Chu dynasty's inheritance, it was already because of the ancestors' protection. Chapter 997. Meng Yunsheng was having a headache. Originally, this was just a dispute in the pugilistic world. As the West Chu emperor, he had no right to be involved. However, now that Eastern Qi had joined the fray, he was in a dilemma. Especially when the 3 sects were asking him about his stance, how would he know what his stance should be? Hence, Meng Yunsheng said perfunctorily, "I know why the 3 of you are here. However, this matter needs to be discussed at length. Why don't the 3 of you rest for a while? I will inform the 3 of you when the discussion is done. What do you think?" Shen Baochen said plainly, "Your Majesty, do we need to discuss this matter at length? We just want to know if Your Majesty is going to stand on the side of the righteous path or the diabolism. That is enough. We also believe that Your Majesty will make the right choice." Before Meng Yunsheng could speak, Dong Huang Tai snorted coldly, "Standing on your side is the right choice. Otherwise, it is the wrong choice." Shen Baochen, since you have spoken, what else can the others say? You are not letting Your Majesty choose, you are forcing Your Majesty to make a choice. Seeing Dong Huang Tai and Chu Xiu walk into the hall, the few present frowned. The diabolism's reaction was not slow. They had caught up to West Chu so quickly. Chu Xiu said plainly, "Everyone, this matter has nothing to do with the 3 of you. The Chunyang Dao sect and the real martial arts sect did not care about the common people and started a war. When the time comes, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. They will have to bear the consequences. Do you want to bear the consequences too?" Shen Baochen shook his head and said, "Chu Xiu, the one who really did not care about the common people is you. Do you really think the whole pugilistic world doesn't know what you did in the Northern Yan? Killing wantonly, suppressing the dissidents. The whole Northern Yan pugilistic world is trembling under your knife. The huge Northern Yan has become a den of demons. The people are plunged into misery and suffering today in exchange for peace in the future." Chu Xiu laughed coldly and said, "What a joke. You're not a Northern Yan man, so what right do you have to speak up for those Northern Yan forces? If it wasn't for me keeping an eye on them, they would have killed more people than I did. Once a hero pulls out his sword, it will be another 10 years of calamity for the common people. All of you are heroes, and all of you want to be heroes. However, little do you know that the ones who bring calamity to the world are you, the heroes who claim to be righteous." That senior Qing of Mount Longhu stood up and said indifferently, "Solitary yin does not grow, solitary yang does not grow. Chu Xiu, you are also proficient in my Taoist martial arts, so you should know what these words mean. The righteous and demonic paths need to find a balance. Right now, your demonic path is glorious enough. In the past few righteous and demonic wars, you demonic Dao always had the upper hand. In the primitive demon cave, the ones who benefited were your demonic Dao. If we let you go on like this, are you going to go to Kunlun Mountain and rebuild the devil cult in the future? Chu Xiu looked at the sleepy senior Qing and really wanted to say yes. However, before he could speak, Dong Huang Tai sneered, "Yes, my ass. Old Daoist, your Mount Longhu was forced by the cult master to seal off your mountain for a year, and now you still have the face to meddle in these things. Another day, when the cult master comes to your Mount Longhu, will you behave yourself?" Senior Qing's sleepy eyes opened wide and revealed a trace of coldness. "Dong Huang Tai, do you really think my celestial master mansion is afraid of your moon-worshipping cult? Last time, the old celestial master didn't want people to die, so he showed mercy and didn't fight head-on. Do you really think Yi Xiaonan is number one in the world?" Dong Huang Tai sneered. "So what? The sect master's demonic might is unrivaled, but your Mount Longhu only has you two old men to support it. When the two of you kick the bucket, I will slaughter your celestial master abode sooner or later and turn your Mount Longhu into a snake-cat mountain." Both in West Chu, the celestial master mansion was the strongest of the righteous sects, and the moon-worshipping cult was the strongest of the demonic sections. The grievances between the two sides were endless, so Dong Huang Tai didn't hold back when he spoke. On the other side, Meng Yunxing saw that both sides were about to fight, so he hurriedly advised, "Calm down, you two. Let's talk this out." However, as an emperor, his presence was extremely low, and the people on both sides didn't listen to him at all. Senior Qing threw away the cane in his hand, and lightning flashed around him. A thunder god Dharma idol appeared behind him. "Dong Huang Tai. You're courting death. I gave you some face, but you still dare to open a dye shop. Even if I kick the bucket one day, I will still drag you down with me." As soon as he finished speaking, Senior Qing directly rushed towards Dong Huang Tai, the purple heaven thunder in his hand shining. How did that power seem like someone who was about to die? Dong Huang Tai sneered, "Then this lord will send you down first." Boundless black demonic flames rose, and the power of the burning sky mirror had been exerted to the extreme by Dong Huang Tai. Even though he hadn't completely recovered from the loss of vitality in the primitive demon cave, it didn't affect his combat power at this time. Although the two of them fought, they were still restrained. They didn't directly blow up Meng Yunxing's palace, but directly rushed out of the palace and fought fiercely outside. Xian Longzi looked at Chu Xiu at this time, and he said, "Official Chu is now famous in the martial world, but last time, you and I didn't fight to our heart's content. This time, you and I both stepped into the real fire spirit refinement realm. I want to see official Chu's true strength." In the past, Xian Longzi had fought with Chu Xiu once, but at that time, Chu Xiu was only a half-step real pellet realm, and he was a real pellet realm. It could be considered as bullying the weak. As a result, he couldn't suppress Chu Xiu, and he was interrupted by Chu Wuji halfway. Now, he had stepped into the real fire spirit refinement realm not long ago, and Chu Xiu had even caught up and stepped into the real fire spirit refinement realm earlier than him. Xian Longzi didn't have any jealousy, but he was very interested in Chu Xiu. As his voice fell, Xian Longzi's figure moved, and he rushed towards Chu Xiu. His figure turned into a lightning, and his speed was extremely fast. In the past, when Chu Xiu faced Xian Longzi's terrifying speed, he couldn't even see the opponent's figure with the heaven sun gazing at air technique. Now, Chu Xiu didn't care about any speed. He condensed the annihilation fire around him, and he slapped Xian Longzi away. Lightning exploded, and the lightning around Xian Longzi condensed into a liquid that revolved around his body, extinguishing the world-extinguishing flames that were like maggots in his bones. Although he suffered a loss, Xian Longzi still laughed loudly and said, "Haha. Awesome." With a loud roar, Xian Longzi rushed towards Chu Xiu again, and the two fought outside the hall again. Shen Baochen and Yan Ji looked at each other. Since they were fighting over there, they certainly couldn't be idle, so they rushed towards Xiang Chong together. In fact, they didn't know who Xiang Chong was. As a prince of the Northern Yan and the person in charge of the Imperial Consecration Hall, Xianchong was very famous in the northern Yan. However, outside of the northern Yan, he was just a nobody. However, in Shen Baochen and Yan Zhi's opinion, regardless of who the other party was, anyone who was so close to people like Chu Xiu and Dong Huangtai was definitely a demon. They just had to fight. At the sight of this, Xianchong cursed inwardly as he frantically defended himself. Since he came in, he hadn't said a word. Why did he have to be beaten? Most importantly, Dong Huangtai and Chu Xiu were fighting one-on-one. If it was me, why is it a siege? Don't you have any shame? The few of them fought all the way to the outside of the palace. The power directly attracted all the experts in the palace, but unfortunately, no one dared to stop them. West Chu was not strong. In the entire West Chu royal family, or even the West Chu court, the strongest person was only Yuan Fu, who was in the true fire spirit refinement realm. He was about the same level as Xianchong and could not be compared to Chu Xiu or Dong Huangtai. At this time, in the field, everyone had already exchanged a few blows. Although it was chaotic, it was still clear who had the upper hand and who was at a disadvantage. Dong Huangtai's side was obviously at a disadvantage. Senior Qing from Longhu Mountain looked like he was going to die no matter how you looked at it. However, his strength was extremely shocking. His strength was unfathomable, and the exquisiteness of his attacks was accumulated through countless battles. In addition, Dong Huangtai's injuries from burning his blood essence had not yet healed, so he was at a disadvantage. As for Chu Xiu's side, he completely had the upper hand. Xian Longzi was the most talented person in the generation of the Celestial Master Mansion. If it was not for his personality that often went crazy, perhaps the person in charge of the Celestial Master Mansion would be him. After entering the true fire spirit refinement realm, Xian Longzi's strength was even more shocking. His speed was extremely fast, and his body could even transform into the thunder of heaven and earth. Before his voice even arrived, he was already there. With a casual strike, the 5 thunder execution fell like a thunderstorm. The power was simply shocking. However, no matter how shocking the power was, it could not withstand the extreme power. The peerless heavenly saber's damage was too serious. To use the evil moon saber, one had to rely on the heart demon to suppress the weapon spirit. There was too little time, so Chu Xiu directly used his body to fight Xian Longzi. No matter how fast Xian Longzi was, as long as he came into contact with Chu Xiu's world-extinguishing flame, he would immediately retreat far away and use his own strength to resist the power of the world-extinguishing flame. As long as Chu Xiu's fist flew over, Xian Longzi would have to use all his strength to resist. After all, he had just entered the true fire spirit refinement realm. In terms of power, he was completely suppressed by Chu Xiu. The most unlucky person was Xianchong. He really could not hold on much longer. Although Yan Zhi had also entered the true fire spirit refinement realm not long ago, his talent was extraordinary. He had merged with the divine weapon Yan Zhi from a young age, so his strength was definitely not weak among the 5 sword sections. As for Shen Baochen, he was even more terrifying. The leader of the sword hut was in the prime of his life and was still very young. It could even be said that among the 5 sword sects, he had the greatest hope of entering the mysterious heaven and earth realm. Furthermore, by relying on some external objects, Shen Baochen could even directly exchange blows with existences in the mysterious heaven and earth realm. Right now, it was much easier to deal with Xianchong without the 9-dragon seal. Under their combined attacks, Xianchong was already vomiting blood after a few moves. Chapter 998. A total of 7 true fire spirit refinement realm experts were fighting in the West Chu Imperial Palace. Even though they had restrained their strength, they still managed to destroy the entire palace's array. Meng Yunqing finally couldn't take it anymore. He angrily shouted, "Stop! All of you stop!" This was the West Chu Imperial Palace and he was the West Chu Emperor. In the end, this group of people were fighting in front of him. Was there still any law? Were they not putting him in their eyes? This was too much of a bully. Meng Yunqing was the emperor after all, and these 2 groups of people needed his help. Seeing that Meng Yunqing was truly angry, both sides could only stop. Xiang Chong saw that Shen Baochen and Yan Ji had retreated and he let out a sigh of relief. If they had continued fighting, he would have died here. At this time, Yuan Fu was staring at Dong Huang Tai. Who would believe you? Who was the one who said they wouldn't fight? Dong Huang Tai sensed Yuan Fu's gaze. He shrugged and pointed at Senior Qing, implying that he would only promise that he wouldn't attack, but if that old man wanted to cause trouble for him, he couldn't just let himself be captured, could he? Meng Yunqing let out a long sigh and said, I say everyone, can't we just talk things out? Why do you have to fight? My West Chu is a small country and you want to force this emperor to take a side. This emperor doesn't know what to do. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, I know this is difficult for your majesty, so I won't make any promises. I just want to ask your majesty a few questions. Meng Yunqing was stunned and said, Official Chu, please speak. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, between the righteous and demonic sects, your majesty doesn't need to consider the matters of the pugilistic world. The pugilistic world is the pugilistic world and the court is the court. I just want to ask your majesty, without considering the righteous and demonic sects, if Eastern Qi attacks the Northern Yan, will West Chu help or not? Meng Yunqing immediately said, help. Of course we have to help, the teeth are cold without the lips. If the Northern Yan is destroyed, with our West Chu's strength, we will be destroyed within 3 months with 100% certainty. Meng Yunqing was very clear about his own power. Sometimes, the Northern Yan called themselves the Great Yan, and sometimes, the Eastern Qi called themselves the Great Qi. Only West Chu, whether it was internally or externally, would always call themselves West Chu. They had never called themselves the Great Chu, because they knew that with West Chu's power, they could not afford to be called great. Chu Xiu asked again, then, Your Majesty, do you think that Eastern Qi will be coerced and controlled by the Jianghu forces after so many years of dealing with Eastern Qi? Meng Yunqing thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, Of course not. As the overlord of the Central Plains, the Eastern Qi imperial court, the Eastern Qi imperial family is definitely not weak. And Lord Chu, to put it bluntly, don't think that you're the supreme leader of the martial arts world in the land of Northern Yan, ruling over the Jianghu of Northern Yan. But in the Northern Yan imperial court, you don't have the final say, do you? You can support a direct descendant of the Xiang imperial family to ascend to the throne, but don't even think about supporting a branch to ascend to the throne. Only when what you do does not cross the bottom line of the Northern Yan imperial court, and is in line with their interests, will there be no conflict between you two. Otherwise, the Northern Yan imperial family will not allow the power to fall into the hands of an outsider, even at the cost of a life-and-death struggle. Hearing Meng Yunqing's words, Xiang Chong couldn't help but puff out his chest. As an emperor, Meng Yunqing could see these things clearly, even more clearly than Xiang Chong. This time, when Chu Xiu helped Xiang Li seize the throne, it was within the bounds of the rules. That was why he could succeed and gain the approval of the entire Northern Yan imperial court. But if he did not follow the rules and supported a person who was not qualified to ascend to the throne, or an outsider to ascend to the throne, he would definitely suffer the backlash of the entire Northern Yan imperial family and the imperial court, even to the point of a life-and-death struggle. After he finished speaking, Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, If that's the case, then why is your majesty still hesitating? Has your majesty not seen the cause and effect of this? Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Meng Yunqing's expression changed slightly. Clearly, he had thought of something. Meng Yunqing was not a mediocre person. On the contrary, he was much smarter than Lu Haochang, and more daring. It was just that Western Chu was inherently weak. Even if it was a hero like Xiang Long, he would not be able to reverse the situation. Therefore, after careful consideration, Meng Yunqing understood the meaning of Chu Xiu's words. If Eastern Qi attacked Northern Yan, Western Chu would not sit idly by, just like the war between the three countries. No matter what promises Eastern Qi made, Western Chu would not believe them. On the contrary, if Northern Yan was more powerful than Eastern Qi, then Western Chu would help Northern Yan. This time, Meng Yunqing was hesitant because it was not only because of the interests and grudges between the three countries, but also because of the Jianghu, as well as the conflict between the Orthodox and the devil. That was why Meng Yunqing was so hesitant. But Chu Xiu's second question reminded him that the Jianghu was the Jianghu, and the imperial court was the imperial court. The two could work together, but they should also look at each other separately. The Orthodox martial arts world could not influence the decisions of the Eastern Qi imperial court. Now, both sides were working together because they had a common goal. The Orthodox martial arts world wanted to destroy Chu Xiu, the devil, and Eastern Qi was coveting Northern Yan. If Western Chu did not intervene this time and allowed Eastern Qi to destroy Northern Yan, then Eastern Qi's next target would be Western Chu. Just like what Meng Yunqing said, at that time, Western Chu would not even last for 3 months. Don't be fooled by the righteous sect's high-sounding words, like they were worried about the common people and were afraid that people would be plunged into misery and suffering. But once Eastern Qi attacked Western Chu, let's not talk about whether they would intervene. Even if they really wanted to intervene, would Eastern Qi listen to them? Would they stop their footsteps to unify the world? Even if Lu Haocheng was fatuous, even if he was an idiot, would he stop if he was only half a step away from unifying the world and accomplishing the great feat that Eastern Qi's previous emperors had failed to achieve? At that time, other than surrendering, Western Chu would have no other way out. Never put your future in the hands of others. Meng Yunqing was very clear about this point. After a long while, Meng Yunqing let out a long sigh and said to Senior Qing and the others, "Everyone, I'm sorry. Western Chu does not want to intervene in the martial arts world's disputes, nor do we want to interfere in the feud between the orthodox and the evil. But Eastern Qi is Western Chu's archenemy. If the lips are gone, the teeth will be interdependent. I know this. So if Eastern Qi sends troops to Northern Yan, Western Chu will also send troops to Eastern Qi." Without waiting for Senior Qing and the others to continue, Meng Yunqing said in a low voice, "Yuan Fu. Here." Yuan Fu immediately straightened his plump body and stepped in front of Meng Yunqing at an extremely fast speed. From tomorrow onwards, Langjia army will immediately move to the border of Eastern Qi. At the same time, gather the Western Chu army and send troops to Eastern Qi. Hearing Meng Yunqing's words, Senior Qing and the others all shook their heads. As the Western Chu emperor, Meng Yunqing still had this bit of decisiveness. Once he decided on something, he would not change his mind. Moreover, they were all sects from Western Chu and usually had a good relationship with the Western Chu imperial court. Naturally, they knew Meng Yunqing's difficulties. This time, Meng Yunqing could not be blamed for choosing to stand on the side of the evil. He only chose to stand on the side of Northern Yan. If there was anything to blame, it could only be said that Eastern Qi was too strong. Anyone would feel threatened by it. So when they heard Meng Yunqing's decision, they did not say anything harsh. They just cupped their hands and left. Of course, they still did not have a good attitude towards Chu Xiu, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others. After Senior Qing and the others left, Meng Yunqing turned to Chu Xiu and the others and said amiably, "This is official Chu's first time coming to Eastern Qi. We will order people to prepare a banquet to entertain you." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Many thanks for your Majesty's kindness, but Eastern Qi's army has already arrived. Perhaps they have already started fighting. Time is of the essence and we must go back to support them." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Meng Yunqing did not insist and let Chu Xiu and the others leave first. After everyone had left, Meng Yunqing suddenly slumped down on the dragon throne, looking extremely exhausted. "Your Majesty." Yuan Fu hurried to greet him. Meng Yunqing shook his head and said, "We are fine. We just feel a little sad. The battle between the righteous and demonic factions, the struggle between Eastern Qi and Northern Yan, clearly has nothing to do with our West Chu, but every time it involves our West Chu soldiers and generals. Chu Xiu has a saying that has spread far and wide in the pugilistic world. In the pugilistic world, being weak is a sin in itself. This saying is also suitable for our West Chu. Being weak is a great sin. We do not ask for our West Chu to unify the world. We only ask for our West Chu to one day be recognized by everyone and not be reduced to a foil in every war. We don't even have the right to choose whether to fight or not. Seeing Meng Yunqing's emotional expression, Yuan Fu also sighed. He was an old man in the West Chu court. In his early years, he was a bandit in the pugilistic world. When he was seriously injured, he was rescued by the previous emperor. Since then, he had been loyal to the Meng family. He had watched Meng Yunqing grow up. He knew that the emperor's ability and wisdom were definitely not bad. He even felt that the emperor was not inferior to the current world's hero, Xiang Long. The only difference was that Xiang Long had the leeway to display his abilities, while Meng Yunqing did not even have the leeway to display his abilities. But this was also the sorrow of a small country. They had no choice but to go with the flow. It was just like what Chu Xiu had said. Being weak was a sin to begin with. Being able to survive was already something that one should thank the heavens and earth for. At this time, Chu Xiu did not know that Meng Yunqing was so emotional because of his words in the past. He did not have time to waste. He and Xiang Chong rushed back to Northern Yan as fast as possible. But before they reached Northern Yan, they saw the Northern Yan military waiting for them at the border. They told them that Eastern Qi had begun to attack. And this attack was from all directions. The border between Eastern Qi and Northern Yan, the Guangzhong torture room, and the Wei County were attacked at the same time. Among them, the Guangzhong torture room was about to collapse. Chapter 999. The Guangzhong torture room was located in the middle of the Three Kingdoms. In every war between the Three Kingdoms, the Guangzhong torture room had always been the unluckiest. But this time, the Guangzhong torture room had truly suffered an undeserved calamity. If not for Chu Xiu, Eastern Qi would not have attacked from the direction of the Guangzhong torture room. The two kingdoms had many other borders, including Wei County. But now, everyone knew that the nominal head of the Guangzhong torture room, Chu Yuansheng, was actually a puppet. The real ruler of the Guangzhong torture room was still Chu Xiu. So naturally, the Guangzhong torture room became one of the three major Eastern Qi attack sites. In less than 3 days, the Guangzhong torture room had fallen more than half, pushed to the gates of Guangzhong. At this time, tens of thousands of soldiers had surrounded the Guangzhong torture room. The east side of the city had the most soldiers, and in the center was a huge chariot. At this time, there was a middle-aged man in armor lying lazily on the chariot. He was holding a glass of wine and had a mustache. He didn't look like he was here to fight. Instead, he looked like he was here to watch a show. But this man was no ordinary person. He was General Nangong Weiyu of the Eastern Qi Imperial Guard. Among the 9 armies of the Eastern Qi, the Imperial Guard could be ranked in the top 3. The military system of the Eastern Qi was similar to that of the Northern Yan. The only difference was that the Northern Yan only had the 5 armies of the state, while the Eastern Qi had the 9 armies of the Northern Yan. Of course, because of the vastness of Eastern Qi's territory, the 9 armies were only stationed at the 9 important borders of Eastern Qi. Apart from wars of annihilation, it was not easy to gather all of them. Nangong Weiyu and Beigong Bailey were old rivals. Even their names were in direct opposition to each other, as if they were born to be rivals. Last time, when Eastern Qi attacked Yan and Chu, Nangong Weiyu had suffered some losses against Beigong Bailey. This time, he wanted to save some face, but he didn't expect the higher-ups to send him to attack the Guangzhong torture room. This made Nangong Weiyu a little unhappy. It was too easy. At this moment, there were 2 people standing beside Nangong. One of them was the Chunyang Dao Sex Mako Mori, and the other was the White Tiger Hall's master, Helian Changfeng. 3 true fire spirit refinement realm experts and the entire Imperial Guard were enough to take down a Guangzhong torture room. Mako Mori frowned. General Nangong, can we give the order to attack the city? You set up the formation, but you're drinking here. What is the meaning of this? Nangong Weiyu glanced at Mako Mori without saying a word. This made Mako Mori even angrier. General Nangong, what is the meaning of this? Nangong Weiyu put down his wine glass and snorted. Do you have a problem with me, Daoist? Of course I do. The Chunyang Dao sect sent me here to assist you, General, but you're stalling for time here. A thunderous strike can kill these demonic cultivators when they're caught off guard. If this drags on, what if something unexpected happens? Nangong Weiyu clapped his hands. Daoist, you're right. All right, you'll be the general. You'll be in command. You do it. As he said this, Nangong Weiyu actually stood up and was about to leave. Helian Changfeng, who was watching the show at the side, hurriedly pulled him back. Brother Nangong, Daoist Mako Mori doesn't mean that. Don't be angry. We people of the pugilistic world don't understand military formations. You can explain it to Daoist, and he'll understand, right? Mako Mori was also trembling with anger. He had never seen such a reckless person before. He was simply impervious to everything. However, for the sake of the Chunyang Dao sect's plan, he forcefully held it in and didn't say a word. Nangong Weiyu snorted coldly. Don't give orders blindly if you don't understand. I hate amateurs guiding experts the most. I'm not as good as you Daoists at chanting scriptures and drawing talismans, but am I not good at military formations? Do you know how many people have gathered in the entire Guangzhong city? Nearly 100,000 warriors of the Guangzhong torture room are among them. Previously, we didn't encounter any decent resistance in other places. That's because the Guangzhong torture room has already transferred the elites of the Guangdong, Guangnan, Guanxi, and Guanbei regions to the Guangzhong city. That's nearly 100,000 warriors. They're all constables and constables who have seen blood on their hands. Although they aren't part of the military formations, they aren't weak either. I have the confidence to win, but what about after that? That's nearly 100,000 warriors, not 100,000 pigs. If they just charge in like this, how many losses will the Imperial Guard suffer? These people are my comrades. Even if you don't feel sorry for them, I will. Helian Changfeng smiled. I see. But Brother Nangong, why are you dragging it out like this? Do you have a plan? Nangong Weiyu squinted his eyes. Have you heard of eagle endurance? You haven't experienced the pressure of a great army. No matter how strong a person is, they won't be able to withstand that kind of pressure. If I attack directly, the other party might rely on their bravery and fight to the death, causing great losses to the Imperial Guard. But when I've exhausted their bravery and only fear is left, then it'll be much easier. An unsheathed blade isn't scary. A blade hidden in a sheath is the scariest. Hearing Nangong Weiyu's explanation, Helian Changfeng and Mako Mori finally understood what he meant. In fact, these warriors from the Jianghu really didn't think as much as Nangong Weiyu, who came from the military. In a battle to the death between sects, even if it's two large sects with more than 10,000 people, they would often swarm in together. It was a battle of overall strength, so there weren't many twists and turns. At this time, Mako Mori suddenly thought of something. He suddenly said, "Oh right, in the Guangzhong torture room, anyone can die, but it's best to leave Chu Yuanqing alive." He was bewitched by Chu Xiu because he had no choice. The Guangzhong torture room is not wrong. The one who is wrong is that devil, Chu Xiu. It had to be said that the reputation of the great hero Chu Kuanga was still very useful in the Jianghu. Even an old man like Mako Mori admired Chu Kuanga's deeds. Although there were many people in the Jianghu who were stronger than him, no one had the face to question Chu Kuanga's title. Chu Yuanqing was Chu Kuanga's only son. Even if he was standing on Chu Xiu's side and was their enemy, Mako Mori still wanted to keep him alive. Nangong Weiyu muttered and said impatiently, "Okay, got it." Mako Mori didn't hear what Nangong Weiyu muttered, but Helian Changfeng on the side heard it. What Nangong Weiyu said was clearly to be a whore and to build a chastity. At this time, in Guangzhong city, everyone was indeed in a panic as Nangong Weiyu expected. Chu Yuanqing sat on the main seat. He barely kept calm and said, "Haven't they attacked the city yet?" Guangdong penal officer Xiao Yi shook his head and said, "No, it seems that they are deliberately trying to exhaust us until we don't even have the last bit of courage to fight, then they will attack." When Chu Xiu was in the Guangzhong torture room, Xiao Yi was the strongest of the 4 penal officers. At this time, he had already stepped into the real pellet state. However, compared with the Imperial Guard outside, a real pellet state was nothing. Chu Yuanqing turned his head to another person and said, "Senior Chu, will there be reinforcements coming later?" It was Chu Wuji who was sitting next to Chu Yuanqing. Because Chu Wuji was also in the real fire spiritual refinement state, he had the strength to guard one side. When he heard that the Guanzhong torture room was surrounded, he also took the initiative to come. Wei Shiya went to Wei Jun to help. However, he was a martial artist who had just advanced to the real fire spiritual refinement state, but he had to face 3 existences who had already stepped into the real fire spiritual refinement state. Even if Chu Wuji never thought that he was weaker than anyone, he was not confident at this time. Chu Wuji shook his head and said, "I don't know. The news has already been sent out. Let's see who Yanjing City will send. Don't be afraid. Even if the Northern Yan Imperial Court doesn't send someone, Zhenwu Hall will send someone." Although Chu Wuji said so, in fact, he was not confident in his heart. The news had already been sent out, but there was no communication array between the Guanzhong torture room and the Northern Yan Imperial Court. They could only rely on manpower to send messages. So when the Northern Yan Imperial Court got the news and sent people over, he was not sure if they would make it in time. Chu Yuanqing nodded and said, "Well, even if we have to hold on, we have to hold on until the reinforcements come. The foundation of the Guanzhong torture room can't be destroyed like this." Everyone said that Chu Yuanqing was a tiger father and a dog son. Compared with Chu Kuanga, he really couldn't find anything special about him. It could even be said that he was extremely mediocre. But no matter how mediocre Chu Yuanqing was, he was not a good-for-nothing, nor was he a villain. This time, when Eastern Qi attacked the Guanzhong torture room, many people in the Guanzhong torture room were already complaining that it was because of Chu Xiu that the Guanzhong torture room was caught in the flames of war. In response to this kind of voice, Chu Yuanqing was the first to suppress it. Although Chu Xiu was the actual ruler of the Guanzhong torture room, he helped him to the position of hall master and did not take away any of the authority that he should have. The Guanzhong torture room was even stronger than before. Chu Xiu did not betray him, so naturally, he would not betray Chu Xiu. Chu Yuanqing could not do something like surrender for survival. And most importantly, the Guanzhong torture room was left behind by his father, Chu Kuanga. This might be the only obsession that Chu Yuanqing had in this life. His strength was weak and his ability was limited. He could not protect and strengthen the Guanzhong torture room, but others could. Therefore, he did not object to the fact that Chu Xiu was actually in control of the Guanzhong torture room. As long as the Guanzhong torture room was still there, and as long as the Guanzhong torture room was getting better, that was enough. But now, someone wanted to destroy the Guanzhong torture room. No matter how weak Chu Yuanqing was, he was ready to fight to the death with his enemies. His father was a great hero, and he died for the sake of justice. He, Chu Yuanqing, was not worth mentioning, but he was willing to fight to the death for the Guanzhong torture room. At this moment, there was a sudden battle cry from outside. Chu Wuji stood up and said in a low voice, "Eastern Qi, they're attacking the city. Hall Master Chu, you stay here and leave the rest to me." Chu Yuanqing shook his head and said, "I want to go out with you." Chapter 1000. Guanzhong had been through the fires of war and was located on all sides. Even if it was a city, it could easily be flattened if a war broke out. Therefore, after the Guanzhong torture room was built, they even spent a lot of money to build such a majestic steel city. It was indeed not easy to break through. Seeing that his soldiers could only climb up using ladders, Nangong Weiyu took out a crimson halberd with a scorching aura. Holding the halberd, Nangong Weiyu headed straight for the city gates. He pointed the halberd at the sky. In an instant, the wind and clouds howled in the air, burning red like fire. With a loud bang, the halberd fell, and a powerful wave of heat rushed straight for the city gates. Even the steel city could not withstand the killing blow of a true fire cultivator in the spirit ascension realm. But at this moment, a strange weapon that looked like a saber but not a saber and shaped like a crescent moon slashed down with a dazzling blood-red moonlight. Its earth energy seemed to cut through the heavens and earth. With a loud bang, it blocked Nangong Weiyu's halberd. Chu Wuji stood on top of the city gates and sneered, "It's General Nangong's turn so soon. Don't you think it's too degrading?" Nangong Weiyu said lightly, "Chu Wuji, it's you. No matter what, you used to be part of the royal family of the Wei Kingdom. You should be on the side of Eastern Qi. Why are you on the side of the Northern Yan?" Chu Wuji said coldly, "Back then, my Wei Kingdom was on the side of Eastern Qi. So what? A country that deserves to be destroyed will still be destroyed. Moreover, Xiang Long is dead, and so are those who participated in the war to destroy my Wei Kingdom. I'm not on the side of the Northern Yan now, I'm on the side of the diabolism." Although the Wei Kingdom was destroyed by the Northern Yan, in fact, Chu Wuji did not have a good impression of Eastern Qi. The Wei Kingdom was a small country and could only survive in the cracks. However, back then, Wei Kingdom chose to side with Eastern Qi, but what happened in the end? The Wei Kingdom was destroyed, but Eastern Qi did not send reinforcements. Instead, they retreated. Later on, Lu Haocheng became even more terrified. He didn't want to fight anymore, so he let this matter go. The only sacrifice was Wei Kingdom. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if Chu Wuji had a good impression of Eastern Qi. "General Nangong, why are you wasting your breath on this evil scoundrel? Just attack him." Mako Mori had already walked out of the formation and stood beside Nangong Weiyu, as did Helian Changfeng. The three of them stood together and formed a joint attack. At this moment, Chu Wuji's heart sank. Eastern Qi teamed up with the righteous martial arts world. This was indeed a force to be reckoned with. Even in a place like the Guanzhong torture room, they had already thrown 3 true fire spirit ascension realm cultivators. One could imagine how much pressure the other places were under. Facing this kind of attack, Chu Wuji snorted coldly, but he didn't retreat. The divine weapon in his hand danced in the air, and blood-colored moonlight sprinkled out. He actually fought 1 against 3, and directly slashed towards the 3 of them. Nangong Weiyu sneered. Miaoyue Dharma Supreme, Chu Wuji had quite a reputation in the diabolism. It should be said that before Chu Xiu appeared, Chu Wuji was the strongest among the new generation of the diabolism. However, who here was mediocre? The general of Eastern Qi, the chief hall leader of White Tiger Hall, and the perfected masters of the previous generation of Chunyang Dao sect, none of them were mediocre. Helian Changfeng slashed down with the saber in his hand. The White Tiger deity shield, which was filled with murderous intent, tore through the void. Mako Mori formed a Daoist seal with his hand. Pure Yang Qi destroyed all evil and demons, and its power was boundless. Finally, Nangong Weiyu's halberd swept down as if it was splitting a mountain. The 3 of them joined forces, and Chu Wuji was sent flying. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. In less than 3 moves, Chu Wuji was already heavily injured. Even the divine weapon in his hand, the divine weapon, let out a mournful wail. Nangong Weiyu shook his head. "Fight till the end? Your courage is commendable, but it's still useless." As Nangong Weiyu's voice fell, the flames on the halberd in his hand floated, and the scorching stellar energy dyed half the sky red. The halberd smashed down, and the fire dragon roared out. Just as Chu Wuji was about to burn his blood essence and fight again, and if he really could not do it, he would retreat with Chu Yuansheng and the others. A whistling sound suddenly rang out. Wherever the pitch-black arrow passed, even the spiritual qi of heaven and earth was extinguished. With a loud explosion, the arrow landed on the majestic fire dragon. In an instant, the scarlet flames on the fire dragon began to extinguish, and were replaced by the black flames of apocalyptic destruction. The flames of apocalyptic destruction even extended along the fire dragon to Nangong Weiyu's halberd. His expression suddenly changed, and the raging stellar energy around him suddenly erupted, completely expelling the power. Triple city destroying arrow. Chu Wuji immediately sighed in relief, but Nangong Weiyu and the others' expressions changed, and their hearts tightened. Chu Xiu, why was he here? He had come from Yanjing City, and he was so fast. In the air, Chu Xiu's body flashed with monstrous demon energy. He descended step by step, and looked at Nangong Weiyu. He said coldly, Are you worthy of using halberd? Everyone in Guangzhou City heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Chu Xiu. While there had been people silently criticizing Chu Xiu for bringing all of Guangzhou into the flames of war and so on. But now that Chu Xiu had appeared, they knew that the entire Guangzhou torture room only had one pillar, and that was Chu Xiu. Nangong Weiyu was about to say something with a dark face, when Chu Xiu pointed at him and said, Retreat. What a joke. Nangong Weiyu sneered and said, Chu Xiu, do you really think you're invincible? My Imperial Guard has tens of thousands of elites. Do you think you can handle them all by yourself? Chu Xiu turned to Chu Wuji and said, Lead all the members of Guangzhou torture room out of the city and fight to the death. I'll handle these three. Chu Wuji nodded and immediately ran back into the city. This time, Chu Xiu came to Guangzhou torture room alone, while Xiang Chong directly returned to Yanjing City. He alone was enough to save the Guangzhou torture room. Xiang Chong still had to manage the 9-dragon seal and could not leave Yanjing City for too long. On the other side, when Nangong Weiyu and the other two saw Chu Xiu's attitude of ignoring them, their faces darkened at the same time. Although the three of them admitted that Chu Xiu was indeed powerful, and even in the primitive Devil's Cave, he could even force Su Ci from the Great Light Temple to retreat with one all-out attack. However, the three of them weren't nobodies. Chu Xiu, did you really think that you could defeat them? But before the three of them could make a move, Chu Xiu had already made the first move. The evil moon saber was already in his hand, and the power of the heart demon began to suppress the weapon spirit of the evil moon saber. There was only 15 minutes, but to deal with the three of them, not to mention 15 minutes, half an hour was enough. The long saber slashed down, and a blood-colored crescent moon appeared in midair. This blood-colored crescent moon was very similar to the scene when Chu Wuji used the divine weapon, Wonderful Moon. However, in Chu Xiu's saber, there was endless evil power. Even the space was distorted, and the surrounding power was swallowed. The saber headed straight for Nangong Weiyu. Feeling the power in the saber, Nangong Weiyu's expression changed. The halberd in his hand danced wildly, and the roar of a flaming dragon surrounded him like a shield of fire. The corners of Chu Xiu's mouth curled up into a mocking smile. The ancient halberd is a ferocious weapon used in battle. What's more important is its aura. The halberd can only be used to attack, not to defend. Halberd is really a disgrace in your hands. As the general of Eastern Qi, Nangong Weiyu's Imperial Guard strength was enough to rank in the top 3 of the 9 border armies. But his use of halberd was really not as good as that of Lu Fengxian. Although Lu Fengxian had not yet reached the true fire spirit refining realm, when Lu Fengxian reached the true fire spirit refining realm, she would be able to beat her opponent. The evil moon saber slashed down, and the evil power continued to devour the power of the flaming dragon, strengthening itself. The saber and the halberd collided, and the dazzling blood-colored blade directly tore the flaming dragon apart. Nangong Weiyu suddenly felt an extremely strong force attack him, and his whole body was blasted away. As a martial artist with a military background, and using a fierce weapon like the halberd, Nangong Weiyu had naturally cultivated a body-tempering technique. However, no matter how strong Nangong Weiyu's body was, he was not as strong as Chu Xiu, who had already cultivated the true fire spirit refining realm. At this time, Mako Mori and Helian Changfeng's attacks had already reached Chu Xiu. The Dao sword in Mako Mori's hand blossomed with pure sunlight, and it was as dazzling as the sun. He had cultivated the pure yang astral qi for his entire life, and his power was already extremely pure. Under the pure yang astral qi, no other power could be tolerated. The saber in Helian Changfeng's hand was like it could split the mountains and split the seas. The extreme sharpness even tore apart the heaven and earth essence energy. The western white tiger's Eugene's sharpness was unleashed to the extreme. As the saber's shadow descended, there was even a white tiger's blood shadow lingering within the white tiger baleful god's shield. In that instant, Chu Xiu's hands formed a seal. Majestic demonic chi and scorching Buddhist light were released simultaneously, and an evil Dharma idol appeared behind him. On one side was the Vairocana seal. The Dharma idol was solemn and dignified, and the Buddhist light was resplendent. On the other side was the demonic god Mahakala. He was ferocious and furious, and his demonic flames surged to the skies. This Dharma idol had 2 faces and 4 arms. The Vairocana seal formed by the colorless sealing palm was like a mustard seed, and the heavens and earth were all enveloped within it. In an instant, it had already shattered Helian Changfeng's white tiger baleful god shield, and shattered the white tiger Dharma idol with a single slap. The demonic god of the great Mahakala put his palms together, and from the 3 eyes on the top of his head, endless apocalyptic flames came roaring down. Its might was earth-shattering, and it directly enveloped Mako Mori in his apocalyptic flames, devouring the pure yang energy around him. He was forced to use all his strength to use the Dao sword in his hand to slash apart the apocalyptic flames, and only then was he able to escape. In just 2 moves, all 3 of them were forced to retreat. In an instant, Chu Xiu's might was immeasurable. And at this time, the gates of Guangzhou City also opened. Under the lead of Chu Wuji, Xiao Yi, and the others, a group of Guangzhou torture room martial artists immediately rushed towards the Imperial Guard outside. In an instant, the sounds of killing filled the heavens and earth, and killing intent surged to the heavens. Chapter 1001. The number of martial artists in the Guangzhou torture room wasn't considered small, but as compared to the Imperial Guard, they were lacking in coordination. In one-on-one battles, or when a small number of people fought, the Guangzhou torture room's martial artists would definitely have the upper hand. Although the Guangzhou torture room's martial artists had the upper hand in terms of numbers and injuries, they were still at a disadvantage when it came to actual combat. However, in this battlefield, other than the Guangzhou torture room's martial artists being at a disadvantage at the beginning, the Guangzhou torture room was suppressing their opponents. The reason was simple: Nangong Weiyu was also being suppressed by Chu Xiu. As a general, Nangong Weiyu was almost equivalent to the soul of the Imperial Guard. In the end, Nangong Weiyu was defeated at the front line, and this was a huge blow to the morale of the entire Imperial Guard. Nangong Weiyu also saw the scene below. He turned to Helian Changfeng and Mako Mori and shouted, "Let's attack together. Don't let Chu Xiu get the chance." Based on Chu Xiu's current strength, they might not be a match for Chu Xiu one-on-one, but they didn't believe that they couldn't defeat Chu Xiu if the 3 of them attacked together. Fire patterns appeared around Nangong Weiyu's body, and a majestic aura poured into the halberd in his hand. The long halberd slashed down, and the roar of the fire dragon resounded throughout the sky. Mako Mori bit his thumb and drew a pure Yang Dao pattern in the void with his burning blood. When his sword slashed on the pure Yang Dao pattern, countless pure Yang runes flourished and shrouded towards Chu Xiu. Helian Changfeng didn't make a move, but the surging killing intent around him had already evolved into a materialized white tiger fiend divine constellation, which condensed on the battle saber in his hand. A piercingly cold and sharp intent surged up, but it was not released. He was waiting for the most suitable moment for him to strike. In the face of the 3's all-out attacks, Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hands. In an instant, a turbulent demonic aura rose from his feet, and even his eyes were completely dyed black. Murmurs that seemed to come from the sticks of hell resounded throughout the world. As Chu Xiu displayed his hand seals, the sky wept and blood rained down. The pure Yang runes that wrapped around Chu Xiu burst and melted under the dense rain of blood, and couldn't even last for a breath of time. Moreover, within the blood rain, the boundless blood color actually condensed into a huge fiend celestial phantom that was 10,000 feet tall. With a grab, it directly crushed the fire dragon that Nangong Weiyu had conjured with his power as if it were an earthworm. In that instant, the sky wept and blood rain stopped. Mako Mori and Nangong Weiyu both spat out a mouthful of blood. After Chu Xiu's Heaven and Earth Demon Weeping Mantra gained new insights in Primitive Demon Cave, its power could be said to have risen to a whole new level. Although it couldn't replicate the power of Primitive Demon Cave, it wasn't much weaker. But at this moment, the moment that the sky wept and blood rain disappeared, a cool breeze suddenly blew past. In the next moment, Helian Changfeng's saber-wielding figure had already appeared in front of Chu Xiu. No one saw how he had attacked, not even Chu Xiu. Clouds follow dragons, wind follows tigers. Helian Changfeng's saber was filled with killing intent, but it borrowed the power of the wind to pass through layers of space. By the time the saber fell, it had already touched Chu Xiu's protective astral energy. The killing intent frantically tore through the astral energy, and the saber intent was even about to corrode Chu Xiu's body. This was Helian Changfeng's essence, qi, and spirit had reached its peak. Taking advantage of the fact that Nangong Weiyu and Mako Mori had already offset Chu Xiu's killer move, he slashed out at the critical point where Chu Xiu's strength was connected. He was confident that no one in the same realm could dodge his saber. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's evil moon saber seemed to have a mind of its own. It suddenly appeared in front of the two, and the twisted blood-colored moonlight swallowed everything in an instant. The heart demon shouted in Chu Xiu's mind, "Only 3 breaths of time left. I've forcefully used the evil moon saber to protect its master, and I've used up too much energy. I can no longer suppress the weapon spirit. 3 breaths of time is enough." The moment Chu Xiu clenched the evil moon saber, the saber intent of the break formula slashed out. Although this slash was hurriedly executed and not Chu Xiu's full strength, the invincible saber intent of the break formula directly destroyed all of Helian Changfeng's attacks. The white tiger baleful god's shield was torn apart. Helian Changfeng watched as the saber in his hand was shattered like tofu by the demonic long saber in Chu Xiu's hand. That was the white tiger hall's divine weapon that had been passed down for generations, the death god. Of course, at this moment, Helian Changfeng couldn't care less about the saber in his hand. The moment the saber intent of the break formula appeared, the invincible energy charged straight at Helian Changfeng. Just shattering a saber wasn't the limit of the break formula's saber intent. This slash could cut the heavens, shatter the earth, and destroy all things in the world. There was nothing it couldn't break. Explosions of energy rang out. The seemingly solid white tiger baleful god's shield was as fragile as tofu in front of this slash. Helian Changfeng's figure retreated quickly, but cracks had already appeared on his battle armor. The saber intent was about to enter his body. With a roar, the blood energy around Helian Changfeng ignited. A hazy bloody mist condensed into a white tiger dharma idol behind Helian Changfeng. As it roared angrily at the sky, it received the power of the white tiger star god. Even though the sky was clear and boundless, Helian Changfeng still forcibly guided a streak of starlight down and attached it to the white tiger behind him. As the white tiger roared, a force that contained the power of the stars and boundless blood chi gushed out from its mouth. However, it was still torn apart by the saber intent of the break formula. However, it finally offset the power of Chu Xiu's slash. Helian Changfeng's eyes flickered with fear. He no longer had any intention of fighting Chu Xiu. With a pale face, he turned around and fled. At that moment, he really felt that death was about to befall him. Perhaps if he had used just a little more strength, he would have been completely cut into pieces by Chu Xiu's slash. At this time, Chu Xiu did not stop. He gathered devil chi in his hand and shot out 3 Annihilation City arrows. Moreover, it was not just 1 arrow, but 3 consecutive arrows. The 3 arrows went straight for Mako Mori. When they arrived in front of him, they exploded. The power of nirvana eroded Mako Mori's pure yang aura chi. The endless annihilation fire had completely enveloped the old Daoist. After the 3 arrows, Chu Xiu did not even look at them. He went straight for Nangong Weiyu. The power of the heart demon could no longer suppress the evil moon saber. Chu Xiu simply did not use the evil moon saber. Instead, he punched at Nangong Weiyu. With Chu Xiu's current physical strength, it was enough to take on a divine weapon. Nangong Weiyu was forced to retreat step by Chu Xiu. He roared angrily, and a layer of purple flames ignited in his eyes. On the halberd, the purple flames erupted. A tiny spark contained a powerful explosive force. However, in the next moment, Chu Xiu's body was filled with Buddhist light. The Mahavarokana Dharma idol appeared behind him. The colorless ceiling palm imprint fell again, distorting the space between heaven and earth. In an instant, the power of Chu Xiu's attack was completely dissipated. Nangong Weiyu was about to go crazy. It was this move again. Only God knew that he, Chu Xiu, was a ferocious and powerful devil. Why would he know such a fierce and imposing Buddhist martial art? However, what Nangong Weiyu did not expect was that Chu Xiu's colorless ceiling palm imprint was even stronger than the one he had used against Helian Changfeng. At that time, Chu Xiu had attacked both Helian Changfeng and Mako Mori at the same time. But now, he was only attacking Nangong Weiyu. Under the twisting strangulation of the endless Buddhist light, the divine weapon halberd in Nangong Weiyu's hand actually shattered. Before Nangong Weiyu had time to feel distressed, Chu Xiu took a step forward and was already in front of him. His fist, which was shining with the flames of destruction, blasted down. It was mixed with the fist intent of the mountain and sea fist scripture. It could shatter mountains and split seas. On Nangong Weiyu's arm, the crimson Gang Qi turned into a roaring fire dragon and met Chu Xiu's fist. But in the next moment, the fire dragon had already been swallowed by the flames of destruction. The armor on his body could not even withstand the power of Chu Xiu's fist and was shattered. His whole body was also blasted away, vomiting blood. At this moment, the soldiers of the Imperial Guard below saw that their general was actually vomiting blood by Chu Xiu. This was definitely a huge blow to their morale, and there were even deserters. If it were not for the strict military discipline of the Imperial Guard, they would have already begun to collapse. Cover the middle army, retreat. Nangong Weiyu covered his chest and shouted angrily. Helian Changfeng had already escaped, and Mako Mori's fate was unknown. He no longer had the intention to continue fighting. Chu Xiu did not chase after Nangong Weiyu, but turned to look at Mako Mori, who was surrounded by the flames of destruction. In the next moment, a scorching pure yang light rushed out from the flames of destruction, turned into a sword light, and fled. It was Mako Mori's figure, but no one knew how much he had paid for it. The three of them fled in three different directions. Chu Xiu did not chase after them, and he also breathed a sigh of relief. Using the Devil's Wail Great Compassion mantra and the sword intent of the breaking word formula consecutively, and fighting 1 against 3 in a short period of time, took a lot out of Chu Xiu. It was meaningless to forcibly chase after them. At most, he could only leave one of them alive, and there was still a mess at the Guanzhong torture room to deal with. At this time, the Guanzhong torture room had won completely. With Chu Xiu fighting the 3 true fire spirit refinement realm existences, although Chu Wuji was injured, he still had combat strength. In addition, the Guanzhong torture room had a large number of people. Even if it was a chaotic battle without any formation, the effect was not bad. Chu Wuji walked over with a slightly pale face. He looked at Chu Xiu with a look of surprise. Previously in the primitive devil cave, Chu Xiu had forced Su Ci to retreat with his saber. But at that time, there was too little time, and he could not observe Chu Xiu's true strength. Now, Chu Xiu was fighting 1 against 3, and all 3 of them were seriously injured. This was a little terrifying. If these 3 people were at the level of the Sun family ancestor or the Lu family ancestor, it would not be a big deal. But these 3 people were not easy to deal with. Their combat strength stood at the peak of the same realm, but they were still crushed by Chu Xiu. This was a little terrifying. Chapter 1002. The battle between the Guanzhong torture room and the Imperial Guard was also a great loss. Looking at Chu Wuji's complexion, he had also suffered some injuries. Chu Xiu handed over a bottle of elixir and asked, "How serious is the injury? Where is Elder Wei?" Chu Wuji took the elixir and shook his head. "It's not too serious. Elder Wei should have gone to Wei County, which is also the main point of Eastern Qi's attack. But 3 of the 5 armies of Eastern Qi and the masters of the Imperial Worship Hall are already there, so it should be much easier." After saying that, Chu Wuji sighed and said, your current strength is probably infinitely close to the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, isn't it? The combination of true fire-tempering spirit and true fire-tempering body is really terrifying. I even want to give it a try. Of course, Chu Wuji was just saying it. He would be crazy to try such a thing. The true fire-tempering body could not be practiced without great perseverance. The success of Chu Xiu's cultivation was largely due to luck. If others were like him, being blasted into pieces and still not dying, it was possible for them to cultivate the true fire-tempering body after their body was reconstructed. The mysterious realm of heaven and earth is not so easy to deal with. At our level, each step is a different heaven. The difference between clouds and mud is not so easy to surpass. Chu Wuji said, but in my opinion, you have at least crossed the half heaven. After a few words of greeting, Chu Wuji directly followed Chu Xiu into Guanzhong City. Xiao Yi and the others were counting the losses of the Guanzhong torture room. When they saw Chu Xiu, they all bowed respectfully. Chu Yuanqing also saw Chu Xiu. He looked a little embarrassed because he did not know how to address Chu Xiu. Although he already knew that Chu Xiu was using him, Chu Yuanqing did not really hate Chu Xiu. After all, his interests had not been harmed, and even his father's position had returned to him. The power of the Guanzhong torture room was also greater than before. Back then, he was Chu Xiu's big brother. But now, Chu Xiu was no longer the Jianghu arrestor of the Guanzhong torture room. He was a giant of the diabolism, an ambitious and ruthless figure who controlled the entire northern Yan martial world. It could even be said that his father was not as strong as Chu Xiu at his peak. Back when Chu Kuanga had fought against Divine Lord Luo of Tianmen, he had only managed to seriously injure Divine Lord Luo by sacrificing his own life. But now, Chu Xiu could already kill an Elysium Divine General. This was the difference between them. Before Chu Yuanqing could say anything, Chu Xiu walked over first, cupped his hands, and said, "Big brother, how have you been? This time, I came late. If I had come earlier, maybe the cities of the Guanzhong torture room would not have been lost." Seeing that Chu Xiu's attitude towards him was almost the same as before, Chu Yuanqing also breathed a sigh of relief, and even looked a little touched. "Brother Chu, you don't have to blame yourself. You came at the right time." In fact, the Guanzhong torture room did not lose anything. Previously, we knew that with the strength of the Guanzhong torture room, it was basically a mantis trying to stop a chariot when faced with the army of Eastern Qi. So when the army of Eastern Qi first arrived, we had already withdrawn our men. The cities that Eastern Qi occupied were just empty cities. Moreover, the Eastern Qi also wanted to completely occupy Guanzhong, so they did not make things difficult for some of the martial arts forces or other people in the cities. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's good. After we finish counting the casualties, let's go to the meeting. The retreat of the Imperial Guards does not mean that we are safe. Eastern Qi does not only have one Imperial Guard." An hour later, all the higher-ups of the Guanzhong torture room and Chu Wuji came to the meeting hall. Chu Yuanqing wanted Chu Xiu to sit in the main seat, but Chu Xiu refused. With his current status, he no longer needed to sit in the main seat to win status and respect. In fact, with Chu Xiu's current strength, the Guanzhong torture room was dispensable to him. Chu Yuanqing did not betray him in the past, so naturally, he would not betray Chu Yuanqing. So as long as he was alive, the Guanzhong torture room would always have the surname Chu. Secretly, the surname was Chu Xiu, and publicly, the surname was Chu Yuanqing. Moreover, Chu Xiu also admired Chu Kuanga, Chu Juxia. But admiration was just admiration. Chu Xiu would be Chu Kuanga for the rest of his life. "How are the casualties in the Guanzhong torture room?" Chu Xiu asked. Xiao Yi said in a deep voice, "More than 3,000 people died, and 10,000 were injured. In such a battle, the Guanzhong torture room does not have the upper hand." After that, Xiao Yi looked up at Chu Xiu carefully and said, "My lord, can the Northern Yan send reinforcements over?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's very difficult. The Northern Yan's strength is obvious, and the 5 armies of the state have already been sent out. If we were to transfer more troops, we would have to transfer the royal guard stationed around the Yanjing city to protect the palace. The expressions of the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room changed. Without reinforcements, how could they defend the Guanzhong torture room? Don't think that the Guanzhong torture room was strong before, but this was a war between nations. A powerful army built with the strength of a nation was not something that the Guanzhong torture room could withstand. However, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "We can't get reinforcements from the northern Yan, but we can think of a way to change the target for the eastern Qi in northern Yan." The Guanzhong torture room is not the main place. Wei County has Jiangshan Pavilion as the front line, and the border between the northern Yan and eastern Qi is also a place that both sides will fight for. The Guanzhong torture room is actually dispensable to the eastern Qi. Xiao Yi smiled bitterly and said, "But the problem now is, how can we make the eastern Qi change their mind?" Chu Xiu thought about it and knocked on the table, saying, "The Guanzhong torture room has been the center of trade between the three nations for so many years. You torture officers must have been involved in smuggling, right?" The expressions of Xiao Yi and the others changed slightly. Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "Don't be nervous. Back when I was a torture officer in the Guanzhong torture room, I also did this kind of thing. Every man for himself will be destroyed by heaven and earth. Who can avoid such a lucrative business? All of you have been in the Guanzhong torture room longer than me. For so many years, have there been any Eastern Qi bigwigs, royalty, and the like who interfered in the smuggling business? Can you contact them?" Xiao Yi nodded and said, "Yes, we can contact them. But Lord, this is the time of war between the Eastern Qi and the Northern Yan. Even if we can contact them, they won't dare to interfere." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Don't worry, you just need to contact them. As long as the benefits are enough, it's not like they won't betray their country. You just need to contact them according to what I said. I won't show myself since my identity is sensitive. But I will tell you what to say in secret." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, although Xiao Yi was still puzzled, he could only nod and agree. After so many years in the Guanzhong torture room, Xiao Yi and the others had accumulated a lot of connections. If the people in the eastern Qi wanted to smuggle things to the northern Yan and west Chu, they would have to sneak in with small caravans. Big caravans would have to get through to the inspectors. And for some extremely sensitive things, they had to get through to the torture officers. So Xiao Yi and the others knew quite a few of the powerful people in the eastern Qi imperial court. But at this critical moment, these people didn't want to see Xiao Yi. But Chu Xiu's method was very rough. He directly threatened them that if they didn't come, he would hand over the evidence of their smuggling to the eastern Qi imperial court, especially the contraband they had smuggled to the northern Yan. So although this group of people was angry, they still came obediently. Of course, they weren't stupid enough to enter the territory of the Guanzhong torture room. Instead, they found a place where the eastern Qi and the Guanzhong torture room intersected to meet with Xiao Yi. In an inn in a small town, Xiao Yi had booked the entire inn. Sitting across from him were several people dressed in luxurious clothes. There were old and young people, but all of them had angry expressions on their faces. One of them said coldly, "Lord Xiao, this is not what you did. We have worked together so many times before. Even if we can't do business, we can still be friends. You followed Chu Xiu and the Northern Yan, but now that you are being pressured by the army, you implicated us. What is the meaning of this?" Xiao Yi knew the identity of the people in front of him. They were all nobles in the eastern Qi, and some were even royalty. For example, the person in front of him was Lu Changlong, Duke Huai of the eastern Qi. He belonged to the collateral royal family. Although he was conferred the title of duke, he didn't have any real power. So he spent most of his time making money and enjoying himself. Xiao Yi waved his hand and said, "Everyone, please calm down. None of you want to see me. I have no other choice. That's why I came up with this trick. Now, everyone should know the predicament of the Guanzhong torture room. This time, I am here to ask for your help." Lu Changlong and the others shook their heads quickly and said, "Don't, Lord Xiao. You know our background. How can we have a say in such a big matter? Xiao Yi laughed and said, everyone here is a famous person in the Eastern Qi imperial court. Why can't you have a say in this? Don't worry. Since we are asking for help, the Guanzhong torture room will naturally show our sincerity. When the Guanzhong torture room calms down, I won't take a single cent from the things you want to smuggle in the future. And as long as you agree to help the Guanzhong torture room once, everything here will belong to you. As he spoke, Xiao Yi opened a secret space box. Inside was a mountain of gold, silver, and jewelry. Although these things weren't very useful to martial artists, they were still real money. Chu Xiu wanted to bribe them with these things, which made Xiao Yi's heart ache. Seeing these things, Lu Changlong and the others were tempted. But they still shook their heads and said, although money is good, the Guanzhong torture room is on the side of the Northern Yen. Helping you is equivalent to selling out the country. The money from selling out the country isn't easy to earn. At this moment, Xiao Yi heard Chu Xiu's voice. He was stunned for a moment, then he asked with a smile, let me ask you a question. Do you think that the Northern Yen can swallow up the Eastern Qi? Everyone at the scene immediately burst into laughter. LV Changlong disdainfully said, our great Qi sits on the rich and populous land of the Central Plains. There are many heroes and heroes. Even if His Majesty makes a few consecutive mistakes, those barbarians of Northern Yen will not be able to swallow up great Qi. Xiao Yi smiled and said, if that's the case, then why are you worried about selling out the country? Not to mention that the Guanzhong torture room is only doing this for self-preservation. Even if we really want you to sell out the country, Eastern Qi won't have any problems, right? If that's the case, what's the big deal about selling out once in a while? Chapter 1003. Chu Xiu had always believed that there were people in this world who could stick to their principles, but more of them were those who were willing to betray their own lives for the sake of profit. These people even cared about their own lives, not to mention betraying their country. If there was enough profit, what was the big deal about betraying their country once in a while? The words that Chu Xiu had asked Xiao Yi to say could be said to be aimed at the hearts of everyone present. After all, it was just a small favor. Moreover, with their influence, they could not affect the real strategy of Eastern Qi. Even if the Northern Yen really won this time, with the strength of Northern Yen, they would not be able to annex Eastern Qi. In that case, what were they afraid of? Lu Changlong was the first to laugh. We are old friends with Lord Xiao. If the Guanzhong torture room falls, it will affect our business in the future, won't it? I will do my part in this matter. With Lu Changlong taking the lead, the others also spoke up and accepted the gifts from the Guanzhong torture room with peace of mind. The nobles of Eastern Qi, such as Lu Changlong, were either useless royals with no real power or talent in martial arts, or some useless nobles who had made great contributions during the founding of the country but could only sit around and wait for death. They might not be of much use when dealing with official business, but they were very good at this kind of betrayal. Therefore, after returning to Eastern Qi, they discussed among themselves and took turns to offer Lu Haochang many good things. What did Lu Haochang like? It was nothing more than women and some rare playthings. Some offered stunning beauties that they had carefully cultivated, and some offered divine birds that they had caught from the 100,000 mountains. They looked like owls with green feathers and red beaks. They were docile and eloquent. Lu Haochang did not refuse any of these gifts. He accepted them and comforted Nangong Weiyu, who had lost the battle, and asked him to rest. He simply forgot about the Guanzhong torture room. In fact, Lu Haochang was not an idiot. He had been an emperor for so many years. Although he was mediocre, he was not muddle-headed. These guys suddenly offered him so many beauties and treasures. If they did not have any ulterior motives, Lu Haochang would never believe it. Therefore, he had secretly investigated and found out that these guys had a smuggling business in the Guanzhong torture room. That was why they were worried that the Guanzhong torture room would be destroyed. But after knowing this, Lu Haochang did not expose them, nor did he punish them. Instead, he pretended not to know and happily accepted their gifts, satisfying their requests. If the water was too clear, there would be no fish. As long as the Eastern Qi was safe, why should he care so much? Moreover, if he really cut off their business, they would all be so poor. How could they offer him so many beauties and treasures the next time there was a problem? Lu Haochang's seemingly stupid approach saved the Guanzhong torture room. The troops that the Eastern Qi had stationed around the Guanzhong torture room were all withdrawn. This allowed the Guanzhong torture room to finally heave a sigh of relief. Although the Guanzhong torture room was fine, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry to return to the northern Yan country. The victory or defeat of one place could not determine the direction of the whole war. In fact, Chu Xiu was also having a headache now. Things had developed to the stage of the national war. It was no longer something that could be solved by killing one or two people. Even if Chu Xiu was given a chance to kill Ling Yunzi, the supreme expert of the metaphysic realm of heaven and earth, it would be useless. Most of the orthodox sects in the Eastern Qi country had taken action. Some of them really wanted to eliminate the evil and defend the Tao, while some were doing it for the interests of all parties. And there was also the Eastern Qi imperial court. Once they started, not to mention the death of Ling Yunzi, even if the whole Chunyang Dao sect was destroyed, the Eastern Qi imperial court would not stop. The national war was not a child's play. Chu Xiu could not sit back and watch the northern Yan country perish, nor could he watch his own interests suffer. So now, he really had to think of a way to break out of this situation. After staying in the Guanzhong torture room for 2 days, Chu Xiu pondered a lot. He looked around, but there was really no power that he could borrow. In fact, Chu Xiu still had some connections in the Jianghu. For example, he was on good terms with Xie Xiaolu. He could totally pay some price to ask for help from Qinqingdi's Heaven Alliance. But unfortunately, the Heaven Alliance could not affect the situation of the war. If Qinqingdi was a metaphysic realm expert, it would be better. As for the Eastern Qi country, he could also ask the Mo family to help, but the strength of the Mo family of Shenyang was basically dispensable. So after thinking for a long time, since he could not find help from the Central Plains warriors, why not look a little further, such as overseas? He thought of overseas because of the Jiangshan Pavilion. Since ancient times, although the overseas martial arts world and the Central Plains warriors were connected, there was little communication between the two sides. The strength of the overseas martial arts world might not be as strong as the Central Plains warriors, but it was definitely not weak. The overseas martial arts world was able to cultivate people like Kang Dongming. There was also the Jiangshan Pavilion, which had been hunted down like a stray dog. It was also because of the resources of the overseas martial arts world that they could rise again. There was also Zhong Shenxiu. Strictly speaking, he was also an overseas martial artist. Everyone knew the name of the East Sea Unrestrained Sky. Although they did not know whether the so-called East Sea Unrestrained Sky was an island or something else, since the word East Sea was added, it was definitely overseas. With such a strong force by his side, why not borrow it? Although Chu Xiu did not know the situation of the overseas martial arts world, there were people who did, such as the Sixth Demon Sect. Although the Sixth Demon Sect was far away in the South Sea and the East Sea were both seas. Chu Xiu believed that there must be some understanding between them. Moreover, the reason why Chu Xiu went to the Sixth Demon Sect was to test whether or not the Sixth Demon Sect would intervene in this matter. This matter had already evolved into a war between the righteous and demonic sects. It had even reached the point where the three countries were fighting each other. The disturbance was already quite big. The bright demons and the hidden demons had already made their move, but the Sixth Demon Sect, a neutral existence, was still missing. After instructing Chu Yuansheng and the others to act as usual, but to be careful, Chu Xiu went all the way to the Sixth Demon Sect in the South Sea. The Sixth Demon Sect was only close to the South Sea, but it was actually on a strange island next to the South Sea coast. It was strange because the island was surrounded by a formation. Even if an ordinary person wanted to find it, they would not be able to. Of course, Chu Xiu was not an ordinary person. He wanted to meet the people of the Sixth Demon Sect, so he directly released his aura in the sea. An hour later, Bushuan immediately came out with some people to personally welcome him. Your esteemed sect is truly fortunate to have Master Chu here. Come, come, come. Let's enter the sect and welcome Master Chu before we talk about anything else. Bushuan's attitude was very courteous, but there was a trace of falsehood in that courteousness. Chu Xiu said with a smile that was not a smile, Master Yi, you and I can be considered old acquaintances. There's no need to play such tricks, right? You should know why I'm here. You also know that I don't have the energy to attend a banquet. The northern Yen side is on fire. Bushuan smiled bitterly. Official Chu, it's not that the sixth demon sect does not want to help, but we are in the South Sea. The South Sea is close to the southern barbarians. When the news came, do you know who came? Chu Xiu's heart stirred. Rama? Bushuan smiled bitterly. It's Rama. Damn, the other party couldn't find the location of the sixth demon sect, so he directly branded a Buddhist seal on the sea. That power was like burning the sky and boiling the sea. One Buddhist seal evaporated who knows how much seawater. For a whole 3 days, the sixth demon sect was shrouded in mist. My sixth heavenly demon sect hasn't even made a move yet, but Rama has already come to warn us. If my sixth heavenly demon sect really makes a move, I reckon that before we can even reach northern Yen, we will be dealt with by the people from Sabodhi Monastery. Chu Xiu frowned slightly. This was the current situation in the pugilistic world. The righteous and the demonic were entangled. The righteous martial artists in West Chu wanted to make a move, but he found the moon-worshipping sect to stop them. In the south, the sixth demon sect also wanted to help, but they were threatened by the Sabodhi Monastery. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I know Master Yi's difficulties, so this time, I don't expect the sixth demon sect to make a move. I came to find you, Master Yi, to ask for a small favor. Hearing that Chu Xiu didn't force the sixth demon sect to make a move, Bushuan let out a sigh of relief. He asked, what does official Chu want from me? It's very simple. I want you to accompany me to the East Sea, Master Yi. There's no hope for the Central Plains warriors for the time being, so I want to borrow the power of the overseas martial artists to deal a fatal blow to the Eastern Qi. As long as the Eastern Qi retreats, everything will be easy to solve. However, I don't know much about the overseas forces, so I can only ask for your help, Master Yi. The South Sea and the East Sea are both seas. As for the overseas forces, it's more reliable to find someone like Master Yi who is familiar with them. Bushuan smiled bitterly. The South Sea and the East Sea are very different. However, I have been to the East Sea several times. Although I don't know much about it, I have a general understanding. It's possible to go with official Chu this time. However, official Chu, I still advise you to be more cautious. Even if you go to the East Sea, it's very likely that you'll return empty-handed. The overseas martial artists rarely get involved in the affairs of the Central Plains. If you want them to rashly come to the Central Plains and make an enemy of a big country like the Eastern Qi, it'll be very difficult. Chu Xiu squinted and said, they didn't come before because they didn't have enough benefits. Jiangshan Pavilion is doing well in the overseas forces. Why do they want to return to the Central Plains now? Isn't it because they have enough benefits? Master Yi, just lead the way. I'll take care of everything else. Even if it's difficult, we still have to try. If we don't try, how will we know it's not possible? Since Chu Xiu didn't want to listen to his advice, he didn't say much. He just took it as a wasted trip. The overseas martial arts world and the Central Plains warriors were basically two different regions. Although Chu Xiu had a great reputation among the Central Plains warriors, it might not be effective in the overseas forces. Chapter 1004. The East Sea was very different from the South Sea. The biggest difference was the number of people. There were many storms in the South Sea, the climate was hot, and the environment was harsh. Therefore, the powers that could take root in the South Sea were all relatively strong, like the sixth demon sect, so their numbers were naturally much lower. The East Sea, on the other hand, had a pleasant climate and abundant heaven-earth yuan qi. There were countless islands of various sizes, including commoners and martial artists. A long time ago, someone had even established a country in the East Sea. Unfortunately, there were too many variables in the East Sea, and they didn't last long before being destroyed. At present, a portion of the East Sea's powers were in the hands of sects and aristocratic families, while the other portion was in the hands of individual powerhouses. They controlled an island and became lords, but they usually didn't last long. There were very few that could last for 3 generations, and those that could last for more than 3 generations would naturally become sects or aristocratic families. For the sake of speed, Chu Xiu and Yi Bushuan directly took a boat to the East Sea. The 6th Heavenly Demon Sect's ship was reinforced by a formation, so its speed in the sea was faster than that of a martial artist at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Most importantly, it saved energy and didn't need to stop. Otherwise, even if a true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist could draw on the power of heaven and earth for their own use, they still wouldn't be able to walk on the water for a long time. As they neared the East Sea, Chu Xiu asked, Master Yi, in the East Sea, who is the most powerful and influential person? Yi Bushuan said, Official Chu wants to make a move on the most influential person? That's not a bad idea. The East Sea has as many islands as there are hairs on an ox, and the various powers are also as numerous as hairs on an ox. However, the strongest person in the East Sea isn't actually the most influential. This is different from the Central Plains. Chu Xiu was surprised. Oh. Why? Yi Bushuan shook his head. I'm not too sure, but it's been like this for tens of thousands of years. Perhaps it's because the martial artists born in the East Sea saw the boundless ocean when they were born. Their hearts yearned for the heavens and earth, but they yearned for power. Therefore, over the years, the most powerful people in the East Sea were all martial arts fanatics, and it was rare to see them. For example, the current number 1 unrestrained Sky Lord Zhongxinxiu was such a person. Everyone only knew that he lived in the deepest part of the East Sea, but no one had ever seen him before. And that sword saint of the East Sea, Kang Dongming. Official Chu, you should have dealt with him before and know his strength. This guy is the same. Chu Xiu muttered, in that case, none of the most powerful people in the East Sea are in the heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm? Yi Bushuan nodded and said, that's right. Moreover, the land of the Eastern Sea was roughly divided into 2 regions. One was the sea near the Eastern Qi land, called the Breezy Sea. There were many islands there, and the wind and waves were relatively mild. It was more suitable for the common people and martial artists to live in. The deeper part of the sea was called the Breezy Sea. There were often howling winds and waves, and the smaller islands would be submerged. Only the truly large islands and powerful martial artists could survive there. The environment there was even worse than in the South Sea. Therefore, Official Chu basically didn't have to consider the forces in the Breezy Sea. The forces on the large islands there were self-sufficient, and they were too far away from Eastern Qi. They wouldn't be easily moved. There were many forces in the Breezy Sea, and most of them had trade with Eastern Qi. Some even traveled between the Central Plains and overseas. These people are worth considering. Then who is the strongest person in the Breezy Sea? Supreme Island Lord, God-eyed Huixingzuan, the 5th Lord Hua. Yi Bushuan didn't even hesitate and spat out the name. He's very strong, and his force is also very strong. Since he dared to name his island Supreme Island, was he really going to be the master of the overseas region? At this moment, a strange expression appeared on Yi Bushuan's face as he said, although he is also at the true fire spirit refinement realm, his strength isn't too great. Not to mention the fact that he's already old, even when he was young, he was still a mediocre person in the same realm. At the very least, I don't fear him at all. Strictly speaking, his force isn't very strong. There aren't many forces that belong to him, but the forces that are indirectly related to him can dominate the Breezy Sea. Chu Xiu suddenly became interested in this 5th Lord Hua. The composition of the overseas region is quite interesting. Someone like this can dominate a sea region as large as the Breezy Sea. Yi Buxian said, the main reason why Huixingzuan has the power he has today is because of his foresight. Huixingzuan's nickname is God's Eye. This God's Eye doesn't refer to the fact that he cultivates some kind of eye technique that can shock the world and make the gods weep. Instead, it refers to the way he looks at people. Moreover, people call him Fifth Master Hua not because he ranks fifth, but because he has 5 godson. At this point, Yi Buxian clicked his tongue and sighed. When I first heard about this, even I sighed. This 5th Master Hua was either a grandmaster proficient in the Tao of divination, or he really had some kind of treasure on him. His eyes were simply too divine. None of Huixingzuan's descendants are successful, but he has adopted 5 godson, and all of them are dragons and phoenixes among men. His eldest godson, sword maniac, Wuxia Xianxia, is a master in the way of the sword. 50 years ago, he had already stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm and was invincible in the breezy sea. If Kong Dongming had been born 50 years earlier, the title of Sword Saint of the Eastern Sea would not have fallen on his head. However, Wuxia Xianxia was a sword maniac and liked to test his swordsmanship. There was no one in the breezy sea who could match him, so he went to the Windbreaker Sea. It was said that he defeated several island lords of the large islands. In the end, he even went to challenge Zhongxinxiu. However, there was no trace of him since then. Many people said that even if he did not die at the hands of Zhongxinxiu, he was buried in the boundless sea region. Huixingzuan's second godson is the island lord of Divine Weapon Island. He is at the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm and is known as the #1 general of the Eastern Sea, Bailey Paubing. He uses his body to fight against divine weapons. Divine Weapon Island is not a place for forging divine weapons, but for burying divine weapons. His third godson is the largest fleet in the Eastern Sea, the master of the Blue Dragon Fleet, Fu Longshao. He is at the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm. In the entire breezy sea, only his Blue Dragon Fleet can safely travel between the breezy sea and the Windbreaker Sea without a single accident. His fourth godson is Nalan Hai. He is also at the true fire spirit refinement realm. However, he is a bit unlucky. In his early years, he had a conflict with Kong Dongming. As a result, his legs were cut off by Kong Dongming. Now, he is living in seclusion on a small island. A true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist without legs. Although his cultivation is still there, his combat power will be greatly reduced. As for his fifth godson, you should know about Official Chu. He is the current pavilion master of Jiangshan Pavilion, Zhao Yuanfeng. I heard that he has become the regent of Wei country. When Jiangshan Pavilion first came to the overseas region, it was basically a stray dog. It even had a conflict with some overseas forces, including the forces under the 5th Lord Hua. Zhao Yuanfeng was still very young at that time. He was not the person in charge of Jiangshan Pavilion yet. However, he dared to go to the Supreme Island alone to negotiate with the 5th Lord Hua. He was valued by the 5th Lord Hua. Not only did he end the conflict between them, but he also recognized Zhao Yuanfeng as his godson. The reason why Jiangshan Pavilion is able to establish itself in the overseas region is not only because of Zhao Yuanfeng's efforts, but also because of the 5th Lord Hua's reputation. Chu Xiu was shocked when he heard Yi Buxian telling him about the 5th Lord Hua. He had never heard of such a person before. He was lucky to have a big shot as his godson. However, if he was lucky to have 5 godson, then the 5th Lord Hua's luck must be off the charts. It was no wonder people called him the God's Eye. His ability to judge people was almost godly. However, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He said in surprise, I remember that Kong Dongming used to be a guest of Jiangshan Pavilion. He even crippled the leg of Huixingzuan's third godson. They must have a deep grudge against each other. Why would Jiangshan Pavilion still dare to use him? Yi Buxian chuckled and said, Official Chu, you fought with Kong Dongming before. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he's the strongest person in the Jianghu below the metaphysic realm of heaven and earth, right? Chu Xiu nodded. That kind of monster was certainly not an exaggeration. He was the only freak he had ever seen who could step into the metaphysic realm of heaven and earth but did not take the initiative to do so. Yi Bushuan spread his hands and said, "In the entire breezy sea, Kang Dongming is almost invincible. The 5 godson of Huixingzuan are indeed strong, but they can't do anything to the powerful Kang Dongming, who has no desires. Fighting him to the death would be the worst deal." Moreover, Zhao Yuanfeng was only Huixingzuan's godson, not his biological son. Therefore, they didn't have much of a relationship with Nalan Hai. For a godson they had no relationship with, exchanging an almost invincible guest of the breezy sea, which was a good deal. Of course, in the entire breezy sea at that time, only Zhao Yuanfeng dared to use Kang Dongming as a guest. Zhao Yuanfeng was Huixingzuan's 5th godson, so he didn't have to worry too much. However, the other forces were afraid of offending Nalan Hai and the 5th Lord Hua. Therefore, even if Kang Dongming took the initiative to come to them, they wouldn't dare to use him. Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. While they were talking, the giant ship had already arrived in the East Sea, heading straight for the largest island in the East Sea, Haotian Island. Haotian Island was the largest island in the entire East Sea, including the Breezy Sea and the Foam-splitting Sea. It was like a small piece of land. Haotian Island didn't belong to any force. Everyone could come to the island to trade, live, and so on. More than 10 famous Jianghu masters of the Breezy Sea and the major forces sent some elites to form an alliance to maintain the basic order of Haotian Island. Yi Bushuan brought Chu Xiu to Haotian Island first to inquire about the news. After all, he was from the South Sea. It had been several years since he last came to the East Sea. He didn't know if the situation in the East Sea had changed. Chapter 1005. As soon as Chu Xiu and Yi Bushuan arrived on Haotian Island, they could feel the difference between this place and the Central Plains warriors. The biggest difference was not the attire, language, etc., but the atmosphere. Most of the Central Plains warriors were from sects and aristocratic families. Most of the people who came and went were also in cliques. Moreover, in the East Sea, sects and aristocratic families were a part of it. There were also some islands that were loosely allied. There were also many independent martial artists who came and went between the islands. Therefore, it became a spectacle. Almost everywhere, you could see martial artists trading all kinds of natural treasures and even secret manuals of martial arts. Some of the things that the Central Plains warriors thought couldn't be taught casually could be bought here as long as you could pay the right price. Naturally, information was also available. Moreover, the overseas anemophilia didn't have any integrity. At least the wind-sweeping tower would be a little particular. Some secret items would only be sold to one person. Moreover, in the overseas region, as long as you could afford it, they wouldn't dare to say anything. Chu Xiu followed Yi Bushuan to a long street on Haotian Island. They found a shop with a sign hanging on it and walked in directly. There were many people inside asking for all kinds of information. Chu Xiu looked around and said faintly, "Do you have a private room?" "Yes, yes." A crafty-looking martial artist immediately came forward and flattered Chu Xiu and Yi Bushuan into a private room. He only had the strength of the innate realm. Naturally, he couldn't see through Chu Xiu and Yi Bushuan's realm. However, in the anemophilia trade, whether it was the Central Plains warriors or overseas, it depended on their eyesight. Anyway, with his eyesight, these two were not ordinary people. "What kind of information do you need?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "All the major news that happened in the cool breeze sea in the past few years." The wind medium said awkwardly, "You're making things difficult for me. The breeze sea is so big, and from our anemophilia's point of view, there are major events happening every day." "What level are these major events?" Chu Xiu didn't say anything. He took out an ingot of purple gold and threw it on the table. Seeing that ingot of purple gold, the wind medium's eyes immediately lit up, and he put it into his bosom. He took out a thick book from somewhere and said, "What information do you want?" "I have it here." Purple gold was something that was extremely rare in the outer seas. There were very few purple gold mines in the outer seas. Even if there were, a portion of it was under the sea, and it was extremely difficult to mine it. Therefore, the purchasing power of purple gold in the outer seas was much higher than in the Central Plains. Chu Xiu was so generous. He could even find information from 100 years ago, not to mention all the news that happened in the past few years. Chu Xiu and Yi Bushuan flipped through the book for a while, and they more or less understood the situation in the outer seas. Compared to the ups and downs of the Central Plains warriors, the outer seas was still relatively peaceful. Hua Xingzuan had a great reputation in the outer seas. In addition, he had a few foster sons. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his supreme island was the supreme island of the outer seas. Everyone else lived under such authority and rules. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Yi Bo Sun closed the book and said, "This fifth Master Hua will be celebrating his 380th birthday in a few days. He is also a person who loves to show off and has a lively personality. Every few years, he will hold a birthday celebration and call his adopted son as well as all the major powers in the cool breeze sea to come and have a good time. It can be said that this is the time when all the forces in the breezy sea are gathered. On such an occasion, official Chu, if you can get the support of the fifth Lord Hua and gather all the forces in the breezy sea, it might be possible." Hearing what Yi Bushuan said, Chu Xiu's expression was a little strange. This Hua Xingzuan was already 380 years old. There weren't many true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists who could live to this age. In theory, a martial artist in the true fire spirit refinement realm had a lifespan of 400 years, but this was only in theory. Once a martial artist in this realm passed the age of 200, his body would begin to decline. In fact, at 300 years old, one could already feel that they were close to the end of their lifespan. It was already very rare for someone to survive 300 years old and still have the strength to fight, like the Chunyang Dao sect's Mako Mori. This fifth Lord Hua was already close to 400 years old, but he was still able to go through so much trouble. He could be considered to have lived a long life. Yi Bushuan seemed to have seen through Chu Xiu's doubts. He smiled and said, "Ever since his eldest foster son, Qiu Tianya, became famous, the fifth Lord Hua almost never fought with anyone. Later on, he took in 4 foster sons in a row. Do you think he still has the chance to fight with others?" Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. This was very reasonable. This fifth Master Hua had lived like a prince for such a long time. With his 5 adopted sons around, he could practically do as he pleased in the entire cool breeze sea. Without the opportunity to fight to the death with others, he naturally did not have as many internal injuries in his body. It was normal for him to have a longer lifespan. However, Chu Xiu still felt a little uncomfortable. He was more sensitive about things like birthday banquets. Generally speaking, as long as he participated in a birthday banquet, it would not end well. He also wondered if he was suffering from the reverse fate of occasions like birthday banquets. However, this time, Chu Xiu was really going to join forces with people from overseas. He was not going to look for trouble. Therefore, Chu Xiu asked the Anemophilia, "Do you know what the fifth Lord Hua likes? What did the major forces of the breezy ocean give him during his birthday banquets?" The Anemophilia smiled bitterly and said, "With the fifth Lord Hua's identity, what rare treasures can't he get? Moreover, the fifth Lord Hua does not devote himself to martial arts. He doesn't care about cultivation manuals and the like. So, you've stumped me on this. Then how do you give him birthday gifts? Do you just give them randomly?" The Anemophilia shrugged and said helplessly, "Just give them whatever you want. Of course, we have to choose the precious ones." In fact, the martial arts forces of the breezy ocean also had some complaints about the fifth Lord Hua holding birthday banquets frequently. Although the fifth Lord Hua said that his birthday banquets were just for everyone to have fun together, even if he did not give gifts, who would dare to refuse? But since the old man said so, who would dare to not give gifts? Moreover, they could not give gifts lightly. If others give expensive gifts, you can give something light, but it also depends on the strength of your sect. Even if a small island owner just gave a calligraphy painting, the fifth Lord Hua would not be picky. But if you, a big island owner, also gave a calligraphy painting, then the fifth Lord Hua would not be happy even if he did not say it. Then, you would be out of luck. Everyone is competing with each other to give gifts, and none of the forces dare to hide their gifts. The expenses are not ordinary. Chu Xiu said with a faint smile, "Aren't you afraid that something will go wrong by slandering the fifth Lord Hua here?" The anemophilia chuckled and said, "The fifth Lord Hua will not care about an ant-like person like me. Moreover, these things are being discussed in the entire breezy ocean, so there is no way we can control them all. But if the two of you want to attend the fifth Lord Hua's birthday banquets, you'd better think of a way to get an invitation." Chu Xiu asked doubtfully, "Can't anyone attend the birthday banquets?" "Anyone can attend the birthday banquets, but do the two of you know how many forces there are in the entire breezy ocean, and how many lone cultivators there are? On the day of the birthday banquets, the entire Supreme Island will be packed. Most people can only have a banquet outside, and they are not qualified to enter the inner house at all. Only those who have less than 1,000 invitations are qualified to enter the inner house and see the fifth Lord Hua." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and asked, "Then how can I get an invitation?" The anemophilia said, "There is nothing I can do about that. The invitations are sent to the leaders of the various forces, and no one will sell them. However, one invitation can bring 3 people. Some loose cultivators are alone, so they will help their juniors, or directly sell their spots. You can all give it a try." Recently, a great-grandson of the fifth Lord Hua has been giving out invitations on the Haotian Island. You can try your luck there and see if you can get one. Of course, it will be very difficult. The invitations are limited, and even if that person is the great-grandson of the fifth Lord Hua, he won't dare to do anything. Chu Xiu nodded and left with Yi Bushuan. As long as he had some clues, it would be easy to get an invitation. Chu Xiu first went to the place where the great-grandson of the fifth Lord Hua was with Yi Bushuan. The Haotian Island was jointly managed by various forces, and the Supreme Island naturally had a part in it. At the moment, in a house, a young man in a brocade robe was holding a pen and paper, and he was giving out invitations one by one. To be more precise, it was the people who were invited to the birthday party who went up to him to confirm their identities, and then went to him to get the invitations. In the past, it was usually the host's family who came to deliver the invitations, but the great-grandson of the fifth Lord Hua was too lazy to go from house to house, so he stayed on the Haotian Island and called everyone over to get the invitations himself. When someone came, he would cross off the name on the list. It was easy and effortless. But even so, he still reprimanded impatiently, "Hurry up. What are you waiting for? I'm waiting here to give you invitations on such a hot day, and you're still dilly-dallying? Even the old turtle in the sea is faster than you." Hearing that, the faces of the sect leaders and island masters darkened, but they didn't act up. After all, the person was the great-grandson of the fifth Lord Hua, and he was even a direct descendant. It was said that the fifth Lord Hua doted on him, so they couldn't afford to offend him. But seeing this scene, Chu Xiu shook his head. Some powerful island masters were definitely personally sent invitations by the Supreme Island's higher-ups, but the strength of the people present wasn't weak either. At least among those who came to get the invitations, there were many real pellet state, and the weakest was at the unity of man and nature state. But the great-grandson of the fifth Lord Hua was only at the physical invulnerability state. Although with Chu Xiu's current realm, a real pellet state could be easily killed with a slap. But in the eyes of most martial artists, the grandmaster of the real pellet state was already an unattainable existence. In the Central Plains warriors, they could establish their own sects, and in the overseas land, they could also dominate an island. But now, they were humiliated by this young man. This was simply ruining the Supreme Island's reputation. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.